Want me to start?
I have a quick few things to say.
Okay, perfect.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I am Roberta Barino, President of the League of Women Voters of Roselle-Bloomingdale. Co-sponsor for our forum today is the DuPage NAACP. We are recording this forum, and you will be able to find the video on our website, www.lwvrb.org. We are also currently live streaming on our Facebook page, which can be found at facebook.com//LWVRB. Moderator for today's event is Ginger Wheeler from the League of Women Voters of Glen Ellen. At this time, I will turn the program over to Ginger.
Good morning. I am your volunteer moderator, Ginger Wheeler from the League of Women Voters of Glen Ellen. Thank you for joining us. Candidate forums such as this one are sponsored by the volunteers from the League of Women Voters of Roselle-Bloomingdale in order to provide a nonpartisan venue for the general public to have an opportunity to participate in the electoral process by asking questions of the candidates about issues that concern them. This is an opportunity for civic discourse. Recordings of this event may not be used without the express written approval of the League of Women Voters of Roselle-Bloomingdale. The League will only allow audio-video of this event to be broadcast in its entirety, except by the media reporting on the event. For today's virtual format, we directed those interested to email questions to the League in advance. These questions were monitored by League volunteers to be read by me, the moderator. The League, as a general practice, conducts candidate forums in this manner to ensure the questions are appropriate and to avoid duplication of questions, as well as to maximize the time we have allotted. We do our best to read each question asked. The candidates have drawn lots ahead of time to determine who will give their opening statement first. Then, once we start reading questions, the second candidate will answer first, and so on. We will continue to rotate who answers the question first after that. Candidates' questions and responses are timed. I will enforce the timing, so I may have to interrupt a speaker in order to keep things fair and equal. I do this by thanking them. I might say it over and over until they stop. League does not condone empty chair debates. In the case that an invited candidate cannot make it to the forum and there is only one other candidate, then the participating candidate will have the opportunity to make a 2-minute introduction but will not receive any questions. On behalf of the League of Women Voters and the audience, we thank the candidates for participating. Please join me in thanking the volunteers from the League of Women Voters of Roselle-Bloomingdale who are here in the background to assist with timing, collection, and sorting your questions for the candidates. Today, you will meet candidates for Roselle District 12 Board, I believe that's the school board, Roselle Village Trustees, and the Mayor of Roselle. Okay, let's get started. First up is a 2-year seat for Roselle School District 12 Board of Education. This race is unusual in that we have one official candidate, this race is unusual in that we have just one official candidate, but she is a write-in candidate. We are taking this opportunity to explain how the process works. An official write-in candidate still has to file with the election authorities, but voters have to know the candidate is running in order to physically write or type her name on the ballot. The candidate is eligible to have votes in their favor counted as long as their name appears on the DuPage County Election Commission website on the list of unofficial write-in candidates. So writing yourself in at the last minute will not be accepted, but as long as you come close to the spelling of a registered candidate's name, your vote will count. With that, we introduce write-in candidate Blythe Cami to give her 2-minute introduction. Thank you, Ms. Cami. So Blythe Cami, I guess, is invited to go first on this 2-minute introduction. Okay. So Blythe, take it away.
Yeah.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. I did just want to point out, I have been on the board, finishing up my 8th year. I was first elected to a 4-year term in 2013 and then reelected for 4 years in 2017. There was confusion among us this year with the 6-member seats that came up for reelection. And it was our confusion as to who was a 4-year and who was a 2-year term. So the way the filing process works, it became obvious to me that just having to pull my papers for 4-year and be the write-in for the 2-year was the best option for me, just because deadlines had lapsed and I couldn't officially get my name on the ballot for 2 years. But I am a full-fledged candidate. I'm looking forward to continuing my service. Over my 8 years, I have served as secretary, vice president, and 2 years as president. I've served on numerous committees. I've been the District 12 representative to NEDSEC, which is our special education group. I've done that for 7 years. I was president at the time we interviewed and hired our current superintendent, Dr. Henderson. I was very active in the hiring process of our last superintendent. So I've been around a while. I've seen a lot of wonderful, wonderful things happen for District 12 and our community. I think continuation in leadership is so important in these still uncertain times. And I passionately believe that superior public education is a cornerstone for our strong community. I have 2 children that have graduated from District 12 and gone on, and it was a great experience as a parent, and I've really enjoyed taking part as a volunteer on the board. We've seen so many great improvements that really did stem from the passage of the referendum that got us back on.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Gammy. Now for our forum for Roselle School District 12. There are 4 4-year terms up for election and 5 candidates. Giving the first introduction is Kimberly Doris. Second up is James Mcgowan. Third is Christopher Humbert. Fourth is David Franzen. Fifth is Stephen Zurich. Each will be given 2 minutes. And first we will go with Ms. Durris. Kim?
Thank you, Roberta, and thank you, Ginger, and the League of Women Voters for having us here today. And I also like to thank the community for tuning in today, as well as the other candidates that are here on this panel this morning. I am Kimberly Doris, and I am a current District 12 board member running for re-election to the school board. I've been a proud member of the school board for the past 1.5 years, almost 2 years, addressing the financial goals of the district, looking at elective opportunities for our middle school students, as well as how to support our students and families during this current pandemic. My husband and I, we've been Roselle residents for the past 17 years. We have 3 children, 2 who attend Spring Hills Elementary, and 1 youngest who's still in preschool, waiting his turn to go to Spring Hills. I'm a licensed counselor who specializes in child and adolescent development. I'm also have my doctorate degree in education with a focus on counselor education and supervision. I'm an associate professor of psychology at Lewis University in Romeoville, as well as a clinical director for a counseling agency in Will County. My specific interest in looking at what I can provide to the Roselle School Board is an emphasis on social emotional development and how that impacts a student's ability to learn. The school system helps to foster the developmental needs of a child outside of the home. And a focus on academics is part of the picture, and the other part is understanding how children learn in order to best serve our students. I believe that my professional role as an educator and as a counselor can offer the board a unique perspective on ways to address gaps in achievement, ways to engage children with how to offer them different learning needs, and understand the big picture of our child's yearly academic experience. Having a strong school system is part of the community, and it's not just important for our families of the district, but for all taxpayers in town. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very nice. Next up is, let's see, sorry, James Mcgowan. Jim, like to unmute?
Good morning. Yes, I think I'm unmuted now. Yes, Good morning to everyone. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for organizing and bring us all together today to discuss the future of Roselle School District 12. My family and I have been part of the Roselle community for 7 years now. And shortly after we came to the community was the time where all the great work in support of the school referendum of 2016 was taking place. We became very involved in supporting that effort and got to know quite a few community members.
No, she's
in addition to that,
she did her 2 minutes and that's it. Okay.
excuse me, I think, hey, Roberta, I think you're not on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. I've also been very active in working with the Roselle Park District in terms of coaching both youth girls softball and basketball. And the reality is both of these participations have, built a desire to support the community more formally. Pointed to one of the open board of education seats. And for the last year and a half to 2 years, very rewarding experience with fellow board members, the D12 administration, faculty, and the Roselle community and families. I'm seeking re-election to continue the momentum that this board has created. It's important to capitalize on this momentum of the past few years and leverage that continuity and increased community engagement that's come really as a result of the pandemic efforts and working together. I've been a financial professional for 25 years. Therefore, I have a keen interest in ensuring the financial health of the district. And currently I serve as the vice president and I am on the finance committee, which give me avenues to assist and lead those decision makings for all fiscal matters. In addition to that, I remain committed to pushing forward the strategic agenda, which is very exciting for D12 in supporting the student achievement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. I apologize for that little introduction.
No problem.
I just needed to make sure that Blythe, our write-in candidate, she's not going to be in the question rotation. So I wasn't 100% sure about that and I wanted to clear that up. So apologies. Okay, our next candidate is Christopher Humbert for a two-minute introduction. Chris?
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Christopher Humbert. I go as Chris, but the ballot says it's Christopher. I'm only told that, called that when my mom is yelling at me for something. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters today and the DuPage NAACP, and most importantly, the voters who have dialed in and either today or for the next month to watch this. I've been a resident. Our family has lived in Roselle and Roselle School District 12 since 1994. I've also I'm currently the president of Shepherd Medical Products, a Roselle business. As a current member of School District 12 board since February 2020. What a year, by the way, to be on the board. I'm running for re-election. Today, my appeal is an overwhelming endorsement of all 4 current board members. You heard Jim talk about continuity. Kimberly Doris, James Mcgowan, Stephen Zurich, and myself, Christopher Humbert. Some of the personal goals that I bring to the board and leadership of School District 12, safety for students, families, and staff, stability and growth in learning, an environment for every student's best possible growth, the best preparation for the next level, whether it's middle school or high school. But most important and near and dear to my heart is a way of life of treating all people right and well always. Bring everyone to the table, provide an environment of growth for everyone, and most important, always protect the dignity of every person. I hope to earn your confidence today and your vote in the results we've accomplished as a board, in what I have to say, but most important, by sharing what I stand for every day. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next candidate is David Franzen, and he will be doing his 2-minute introduction.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for this opportunity. As Chris just highlighted, very clearly. I am the only non-current board member running. I'm sorry I didn't get your endorsement, Chris, but my wife and I were both raised in Roselle. We have a young daughter about to be a year old that will be going through the District 12 school system. I really got involved in this once I had a daughter, and I started attending the board meetings and beginning to educate myself on the state of District 12. And I think I have a lot to offer in terms of just a different opinion, a different viewpoint. If I were to be elected, I would be by far the youngest candidate. And I'm at a point in my career, not quite at the executive leadership level as some of these other gentlemen, but I'm at the point in my career where I am actively advising those executives within my organization on the next steps to take, and continuing to do the work to support those decisions. So I think, I have a go-getter attitude, very positive, and I want to bring that positivity and different viewpoints to the district. So thank you again. Look forward to the continued discussion.
Thank you. Next up is Steve Zurich.
Good morning. I'm Steve Zurich, the current Board of Education President for Roselle District 12 and a community resident for 14 years. I became involved with the district in 2016 when we needed an operating referendum passed so that we could update our severely aging schools and restore our district back to financial health. I was elected to the board in 2017, and during my first term, I have been a member of the Finance Committee, oversaw the remodeling of both of our school campuses, hired a new superintendent, and restored our district to financial health. Having a strong financial position going into the pandemic allowed us to weather the storm without reducing staff, and we were able to secure all the necessary PPE to bring our students and staff back to in-person learning in August of 2020. And to this day, we've had no remarkable COVID-related incidences. I became the board president right after the state mandated all of the schools convert to a remote learning model. The top priority, as I saw it, was to be visible to our staff, students, and family. And this meant frequent communications through emails, videos, and letters. Roselle District 12 switched to a fully remote model in less than 14 days, well ahead of many of the surrounding districts due to our one-to-one teaching model. However, we knew we needed to plan for how we were going to return in the fall. Throughout the summer of 2020, I worked alongside our administration to evaluate all learning models, and we were able to implement a 5-day per week dedicated instruction model for both remote and in-person learners. This is the gold standard, and we've seen our reading and math scores increase overall versus pre-pandemic levels. Our district is a success story, not only in DuPage County, but in the Chicagoland area because of the leadership tone that I've set with our board and our staff. Our experienced Board of Education works extremely well together. All of the incumbent candidates have stepped up and led our district in a variety of capacities. Experience and the wisdom we've gained over the last year will guide our board to make effective decisions over the next 4 years. I'm excited to continue on the board and serve the children and families of Roselle District 12. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we've heard our 2-minute introductions from each candidate, and now we're going to start with questions that were sent in advance. And each candidate will have the opportunity for a 1-minute answer to this question. Again, these were sent in advance. So our first answerer is going to be Jim Mcgowan. So the question is there a diversity, equity, and inclusion plan for the district? If yes, what are its main pillars? If no, how do you plan to implement one? For example, what are your priorities for the district in the coming year as it relates to equity? How will you increase the number of diverse educators and administrators within your district? How will culturally responsive practices impact your district? And Jim Mcgowan will answer first.
Sure, thank you. I mentioned, Roselle as a small community that we've been a part of for 7 years, I was that it's always been very open and an understanding and a welcoming community. Specific to School District 12 and the board and the administration, we've become very focused in dialogues as well as updating our strategic goals and mission to be more inclusive and more specific about equity and inclusive type situations, and to make it more of a topic and focus of discussion in the decisions that we make. In order to create that open and honest dialogue, to have that embracing type community and represent it at our schools, I think all will work together to move that agenda forward. Specifically next year, we will be instituting equity audits at both schools, and those will be designed to really take that first step to driving this agenda forward and making sure it becomes an important part of our future.
Thank you. Next up is Chris Humbert.
Thank you. I'm going to repeat briefly some of the things that Jim mentioned. First off, in the vision of Roselle District 12, our vision is to prepare students ethically to engage in a global society. So I think that's very important. And as Jim said, we adopted some district goals already in the strategic plan. An equity audit is planned for by June 30th of 2022. And there are other elements of this in the strategic plan that address diversity. But I think diversity starts with the school board. And I believe that we should have, in addition to more women on the board, because I feel the most qualified board member is a woman currently, but we should also encourage more participation from our community, from all areas of diversity, any different languages. We have several different languages that our students speak currently. I think I want to quote Martin Luther King Jr. and say the function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically.
Thank you.
Intelligence plus character, that's the goal of education.
Thank you. I'm just to remind the candidates that the timer is up there, so maybe try to keep an eye on it. David Franzen, you were next. Same question about diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Thank you, Ginger. So as far as equity is concerned, I'm a strong believer in equality of opportunity that may not necessarily equate to equality of outcome, but the education system can start by giving a strong foundation and provide the equality of opportunity for our students. I think a big part of that as well is monitoring the tax base. One of the biggest barriers of entry into any community is the tax burden placed on the family. I think the referendum that was passed previously was required, and Steve and the team did a good job, but we need to monitor and control any future tax hikes. Also, in terms of diversity, I believe that there is just as much diversity within a group of individuals as between different groups of individuals. I am very concerned when I hear about equity audits. I'm not sure the metrics that would be used, to ensure this equity.
Thank you. Thank you. And next up, we'll hear from Steve Zurich.
So as a board, we've already adopted some district goals in our comments last month as part of our strategic plan. So one of our largest goals is encouraging our students to embrace diversity. We want to expand thinking around that, around those concepts, and show students that having diverse backgrounds and diversity of thought and bringing multiple perspectives is extremely constructive responses to problem solving. I want to emphasize that our district has always had a cultural response. We started with character counts, which was an early initiative. And our educators have been making effective connections with our students and embracing their cultures. And we even had some things in our district where we encouraged, we had a culture evening where students were encouraged to bring foods from their culture to the event. And it was really cool to see kids embrace that and other kids understand the cultures of their fellow students.
Thank you. Last up for this question is Kim Durris. You need to unmute.
Thank you. In regards to this question, I believe that the administration and educators of this school should reflect the student body. It's important that the books that our students see in the library, the curriculum resources that are provided to them by their teachers, and additional learning opportunities, that all of these show respect for and an understanding of a diverse number of historical figures in our history. The intention of an equity audit is to look at the district's publications, what they're bringing to our students, and make sure that it reflects critical components of a child's learning experience. The recently adopted strategic plan for the district includes updated goals specific to the area of diversity and its commitments for District 12. In regards to the diversity of staff, I believe that this has to happen at the administration level and how the district markets its open positions, allowing for more diverse candidates to be included in the pool. And by doing this, we're engaging in critically responsive factors for our district.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the next question, also was provided in advance. Our first person to answer this question will be Chris Humbert. The question is, how should the school board effectively evaluate the superintendent, the only employee the school board does evaluate? How should the board compensate the superintendent based on its evaluation? Chris?
Thank you. First off, the superintendent is a contracted employee, so there's a contract in place that is executed each year. And the increases are developed by the Consumer Price Index as in the contract. But more specifically to the goals, we work directly with the superintendent monitoring goals every year. The board has a looking at the strategic plan to verify that we are on plan and that it envelops our mission, our vision, and our core values. And also the superintendent's performance is year to year based on if we're going to extend and also follow through with the length of the contract. But basically we are looking for a strategic plan execution and the fulfillment of all the sub parts of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up to answer that same question is David Franzen.
Yes, so unfortunately, I'm not currently on the board, so I'm not as familiar with the contract for the superintendent. But I believe that, if there's a contract in place and there's clearly defined metrics for success, then those are what their performance should be measured by. Furthermore, I believe that the Board of Education, and I've seen this firsthand by attending the board meetings, is doing a good job working collaboratively with the current superintendent. And I'm very impressed with the current superintendent's performance and her genuine care for the district. I think it really comes across during each and every board meeting.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Stephen Zurich.
Yeah, so I will echo what Chris said, is that, the superintendent is a contracted employee. And so, increases are tied to CPI. But we also evaluate her on 4 key areas: mission, vision, and core values, curriculum, instruction and assessment, engagement with families and community, and school improvement. Between our superintendents, between Dr. Prokowski leaving and Dr. Mary Henderson coming to the district, we did take an opportunity to revise the contract so that it has more robust sections in terms of ratings that we are giving as each board member, and then compiled into an average weighted rating. So everything from exceeds expectations all the way to not meeting expectations. And we give her a rating, and then that does directly affect whether we extend a new contract or we change the term length.
Thank you. Next up then is Kim Durris. Wait, your mic is not quite working yet. Hold on. Our technical people are hopefully in the background working to unmute you.
Hey, Kim, do you have a button on your headphone that maybe you might have hit?
There you go. Now try to unmute it.
Hello, is it working now?
Yeah, now you're
Okay.
on.
Okay, yeah, all right, thank you. So I did have the privilege of being involved in the current hiring of the superintendent with the board, and we did work to develop a contract. It obviously includes your standard pieces of compensation, looking at, insurance and vacation time, sick time, which is all pretty standard from district to district. One of the things that the board chose to do with the development of this contract was to alter the evaluation plan. We really felt that the superintendent should be evaluated on very specific, measurable, and objective goals that directly related to our needs for District 12. So the superintendent's contract or the evaluation plan was included in the process for a mid-year evaluation, and again at the end of the year, where we look at her performance not just tied to compensation, but how it's tied to the renewal of her contract. And so looking at the compensation package is more of a numbers piece, but we really were more concerned about how we evaluate our current superintendent.
Thank you. And finally, on this question about the superintendent, Jim Mcgowan.
Yeah, a little bit repetitive, but I would underscore, this board took a real opportunity in the changeover with the new superintendent, with Dr. Henderson, to be very focused and evolve the contract that we had her sign. She is held accountable to strategic goals. I think it's important to really understand that some folks on the board with more business type backgrounds, we work to make sure that, they're known as SMART goals, but they were very measurable, very understandable to Dr. Henderson and what she needed to do to achieve those goals. Using an exceeds, meets, and needs improvement to really specify to her where she should focus her efforts. As Kim said, for a basis is the length of contract and the renewal of that contract at the current state is what she's toward and tried to ensure as she meets those objectives moving forward.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I believe everyone's answered that question. So David Franzen will answer this next question first. The question is, what is your stance on in-person learning being required for students prior to a vaccine being widely available to students? David?
So talk about a loaded question. I'm 100% advocate of in-person learning. I think the priority needs to be a return to in-person learning as quickly as possible. With that said, you need to do it safely and follow the science. But I think we need to be very careful between following the science and, tailoring to public opinion, maybe. Just because certain individuals may not be comfortable with it, that doesn't necessarily mean that the science leads credence to maintaining the offering of both in-person and remote learning. Myself, I know that I benefit greatly from being around individuals, working closely with different individuals. And I think that also has a part of the diversity, right? We can't sit here and say that we want diversity and not push to have students working closely together where they can learn and leverage each other's diversity.
Thank you. Next up on that same question about in-person learning is Stephen Zurich.
So our district is here already at this stage to a degree. We're one of a handful of districts in DuPage County that has implemented a 5-day per week dedicated instruction model for both remote and in-person learners. And we began planning for this, as early as April of last year. We had a 20-person planning committee that we stood up that was comprised of all our our campus principals, social workers, nurse, teachers from both campuses. And then we proactively identified 10 different work streams that range from school safety to hygiene protocol to technical infrastructure to learning models. We've been able to successfully grant each of our families first choice, whether they wanted to be remote or in person, both in the fall term and in the spring term. But we have a lot of agencies that we're working with, either the CDC, DuPage County Board of Health, and others. And we're really letting the science drive how we're back in school at this point so that we don't have any remarkable COVID-related issues.
Thank you. Next up on that same question, Kim Durris.
Thank you. So the district's been doing this so far for this entire wave of the pandemic. We've been successful with implementation of 2 different learning models, an in-person learning model as well as a remote learning model. And as we move closer to what is hopefully the end of the COVID era, I'm eager to definitely see all of our students back in person. While I imagine that there are still more mitigation efforts in place, our district is committed to working with adhering to all Illinois Department of Public Health and DuPage Health Department on safety standards. Requiring in-person instruction without a vaccine could be a matter of public health recommendations. And so our school is not going to implement a plan that goes against the safety of our students. And our families have very different learning needs and very different medical needs that we need to keep into consideration. The federal government has provided districts with CARES Act money, so it allows us to offer the 2 learning models without it being an issue for our taxpayers or the financial health of the district.
Thank you. Next up on that question is Jim Mcgowan.
Thank you. Following the science is a great mantra. Clearly, though, that has implications across all parts of this district in terms of our students. I think we can all agree from a social and emotional standpoint, our students benefit from being around other students and benefit in being this great classroom setting that the district sets forth. As has been said, though, families have different needs and different desires and different comfort levels, be it with a vaccine or without. And so the administration, board, and the district's ability to offer 2 learning models has been fantastic. It's been accommodating and a process of working with the community and understanding those needs. So as we move into the fall, I believe the situations will likely be with us, and we'll need to monitor them with prudent planning and continuing to follow the science as we have in the past over this past school year.
Thank you, Jim. Next up is, and last person to answer this question is Chris Humbert.
Thank you. I want to focus on our superstars right now. First of all, the families. The families have executed the plan, whether it was full remote at the beginning or the hybrid strategy between 5-day instruction in school and a 5-day e-learning. The staff, the principals, the superintendent, everyone has been a star. And that has given us the flexibility to be able to be flexible, whatever the situation is. If we have to go to a full in-person, that's great. If we have to flex out, that's great too. We have the ability to do that. But we also have to respect the needs of the families that are not comfortable being in person until we reach a point of no return where we're back in with a new normal. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we're moving on to questions that the candidates have not heard in advance. So these are first time that they've been hearing these questions. I may have to repeat them. I think we're going to start with philosophy on district finances. So the question here is, how can a board member be a good financial steward of taxpayer dollars, but at the same time allocate adequate funding for resources? So the question is, can you speak to your philosophy concerning district finances? And our first person to answer this question is Stephen Zurich.
Yeah, so everything that we look at in the district is through the lens of financial rigor and really downstream, what we need to anticipate going forward. So for instance, if we're evaluating capital improvement projects that may be happening now, but we're anticipating the tax base maybe suffering in 2022 or 2023, we really evaluate whether we need to do that project or not. My main thing when I came on the board was we did not have 25% fund balance. We were in some really difficult financial times and really looking at things like state takeover. So I'm very sensitive to how we spend money, and having solid fund balances is really what has kept us afloat, and that is the lens that we put everything through.
Thank you. Next up for that question is Kim Durris. And if you need me to repeat the question, please just ask, and the timer won't start until I'm done.
Okay, thank you. When I look at the role of being a financial steward for the district as a board member, I believe that that really has to do with the team that you put in place. Expecting one board member to carry on financial decisions, I think, is outside the scope of looking at all the minor aspects as well as the big picture of the district. And so who you put in place on the board and who you put in place at the administration level is key to really having a solid financial decision body rather than just one person looking at the entire committee process. When I look at decisions that come to the board that have a ticket price attached to them, I think it's a matter of looking at, can we afford this in the short term? What are we going to give up in order to do this project? And then how is this going to impact us long term? The district has a responsibility to the residents and to the taxpayers to have a long-term financial perspective. And so how are we going to be doing 3 years out after this project, 5 years out after this project are huge considerations in whether or not we move forward with executing spending our money.
Thank you. Next up is Jim Mcgowan.
Thank you. The financial health of this district is a focus, right? We had community funding increase through the referendum, and transparency with regard to how that funding was utilized, what it was raised for. Everyone is very in tune to that. So, we have 3 folks on the financial committee right now that put a lot of rigor, a lot of scenario planning. The key to financial planning, as has been said, is to be flexible and to prioritize and understand the cost benefit while always weighing, supporting our students' future and their academic pursuits at the forefront of these decisions. Say that the importance of this is heightened even further given the pandemic and what we all, I think, can agree is the interesting financial situation of the state of Illinois and what may come from budget decisions for the state. So it's going to be imperative that we remain transparent and focused on this topic.
Thank you. Christopher Humbert is up next for that same question about his philosophy concerning district finances.
Thank you. Let me make sure. Okay, I'm unmuted. First off, we have a fiduciary duty to the taxpayers. Our responsibility is to make sure the district is responsible with all funds, present, future. And as Steve has said, we as a district have been in some financial straits in the past. We know what that feels like, and we don't want to go there again. I think stability is strength, and that's one of the reasons why I endorsed the current board members more about the financial decisions that have been made and some of the other decisions with COVID that have been made that have been rather decisive and have put us in a good position to be sound financially. I think Steve mentioned keeping our levels at 25%. We've done substantial renovations in 2018 to both schools, but just looking out for the present and the future and protecting the best interest of the students. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is David Franzen.
So I would self-describe as I'm fiscally conservative. I pay my taxes just like everyone else. Do I want to pay more? No. And I'm sure a majority of the people, whether they like to admit it or not, do not want to pay more taxes either. So if I'm blessed enough to be elected to the board, one of my main positions is you can't increase taxes, period. You got to find a way to work within the constraints of the system, provide the best education possible within those constraints. And I also feel like that plays into the diversity aspect. If you want a diverse and culturally diverse community, then you want to keep your tax burden low so that everyone who wants to partake in your community or the more people have the opportunity to do so. So you can't talk out both sides of your mouth. You have to keep taxes low, and that will foster cultural diversity within the community.
Thank you. This next question, I think, will be of interest to our viewers. What led you to run for this position? Considering this, what priority will you first pursue for change in this district? And Kim Durris will answer first.
Thank you. So with my reelection for the school board, I look back to why I even ran for the school board the first time or was appointed to the school board. And I believe that looking at giving back to your community is just a pillar. I've been in social service my entire adult life. And so giving back to the community on a volunteer basis is a value that I have. And so that was, part of my reason even seeking out service with the board. When I look at why the school board, I look at it as an opportunity, not just as a parent with children in the district, but just as a resident of the community. A community is only as strong as its school system. And so we want to talk about bringing in new residents, growing the population of the Roselle and businesses. You really do have to look at your school district because a lot of people move into an area because of the school district. So my top priority in looking at moving forward is how are we going to capture all students, not just our top performing students, but all students. And so really bringing in that social emotional piece and identifying how can we help our students to learn better is one of my priorities with the district.
Thank you. Next up is Jim Mcgowan.
Thanks. Like Kim said, my desire to get on the school board initially was to increase my commitment to this community, and doing so through the school board and supporting our schools where I have two children seemed like one of the most important ways to do it. In terms of what I would like to see changed and what I would like to keep the focus on if I am reelected, I think one of the interesting things that came out of dealing with this pandemic for our school board and our district was just the increased engagement with our community. I think back to the first couple of school board meetings I attended when my daughter presented, and we were the only ones there. As we've gone through the pandemic, our community has been incredibly engaged, incredibly sharing, offering their perspectives. And so I want to have that continued engagement so that we can leverage those thoughts and perspectives and keep in terms of fulfilling our student achievement plans going forward.
Thank you. I gave Jim a little more extra time just because he was cutting out a little bit there. Chris Humbert, you're next.
Thank you. I wanted to, as Kim said, share some of our skill set and our experiences and bring that to the board and the community. But I think that the goal that's nearest and dearest to me is the environment for every student to be successful. And so I wanted to bring that to the table. And one of the areas that I'm most interested in is supporting special education in general. I think we have some, first of all, it's absolutely critical to the entire community, not just to school or the school district, to support this great team, encourage them. I'm a huge supporter. I think that we have an incredible team. I've seen them first hand down to IEP meetings. I think they should be commended, supported, fully funded, respected, and encouraged to grow. And so I will support this dynamic group. So thank you.
Thank you. Next up is David Franzen.
Yeah, so if we're talking about commitment, I was raised in Roselle, bought a house 2 blocks north of my parents' house in Roselle. I'm born and bred in this neighborhood. I'm passionate about this community. Now, being married with a young daughter, I'm passionate about her education. I want her to have a similar experience to what I had within District 12. And I think, civil discourse like this is a start. And, if given the opportunity, I'm going to take, my views and my positions and, make sure that we have these discussions at the board level as well. And we continue to just embrace different points of views, look at the legitimacy of each, and make sure that we make the right decisions for our community and our children.
Thank you. Next up then is Stephen Zurich.
Yeah, so we've had a lot of changes in the last 4 years. We've hired a couple of assistant superintendents, and they're really needed positions. And one of the big ones was hiring Kelly Lynn, who was our assistant superintendent for teaching and learning. And what she brought to our district was a focus on building electives into our curriculum. We are now moving forward to see how we can make those electives help our students when they move to Lake Park, maybe give them some early exposure to language, to science, and so forth. But I really want our district, I'm focused on curriculum. I really want our district to be known outside of our district as leading the way, as being an educational leader and creating good opportunities for our children.
Thank you. Okay, I believe everyone has answered that question. So I think we have time for maybe one more question, and then we'll do the closing statements. And as we had discussed in our pre-meeting, when we drew lots, we're going to reverse the order of who answers the closing statements first. But before we do that, let's start with Jim Mcgowan for this last question. And I'm actually going to try to combine two questions here because they sort of seem related to me. And it's about the pandemic. Kim mentioned the emotional situation with children and families right now, given the current learning environment and the pandemic and everything. So given pandemic stress, isolation, loss, etc., what types of social emotional learning needs to be incorporated into the curriculum now? And how can kids make up any academic progress lost this year? And the first person to answer that will be Jim.
Thanks. Obviously, fantastic question, very pertinent. I can just share personal reference to start. I guess, we have two daughters, and even in the time where we have extended remote, can see change in their classroom. So I would say the first thing is just a recognition of the issue, and through that recognition, working together as an administration, looking at the curriculum, how can we expand it to have that recognition that there is a need there? How can we address it? And how can we engage the community to help us with that? I think one of the things we have been talking about as a board, and I know the D12 administration and faculty have, is can we beef up the summer school offerings this year, both from a curriculum, but also from a social and emotional learning standpoint. And so no final decisions have been made there. But again, I think that awareness of the issue and the drive to address it is important.
Thank you. Next on that question is Chris Humbert.
Thank you. I think we've got a little ways to go to close the gap to get back to our normal progress. We've seen some excellent test results, but we have created a gap in some ways. I think we need to close that gap by, as Jim said, looking at some summer programs. I think looking at some supplemental learning at home, perhaps, in addition, that would be complementary to the curriculum. And then on the social side, I think looking at maybe some social gatherings in small groups of students outside of the regular full-size class remote to encourage more interaction right now to fill the gap. But I think just also looking at our special needs students across the board at all levels and making sure that all the resources are applied in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you. David Franzen.
So I think what comes down to a big part of it is, supporting our families and, as Chris said, getting people together in a responsible manner. All the little things that we're missing that we went without during the pandemic, we're realizing that those little things matter. the small get-togethers, just the social interactions. It's what, it's what children need to make sure that, they play well together with others. Because ultimately, life's a lot simpler than you think, right? People hire people who play nice with others. Ultimately, it boils down to that as part of it. So I think, we need to get back to the basics, talk to our community, and foster community growth and social interaction to make sure that our children get time with each other and they can be exposed and learn from each other.
Thank you. And Stephen Zurich.
So I think one of the things that we did initially was we did not want kindergarten to be remote. Kindergarten is the basis for everything that really happens in school. And I don't know how many people think of it that way, but that's the way I think of it. That's how kids learn to play. That's how they learn to socialize. That's how they learn to, interact with one another. I think, I've looked at the pandemic, in a lot of different ways, but there are some positives that have come out of that. We've got kids that, they're communicating in kind of a remote fashion, even when they're in person. We've all had those funny stories where kids are texting one another and they're standing right next to one another. That's been an opportunity for us to actually help those children communicate the right way and communicate in a different way and develop that skill more. And it's helped our instructors as well. So that's kind of where I'm at with that question.
Thank you. Yes, and I think we're all, even the adults are like that too. So Kim Durris, our last answer on our last question. Kim?
Well, I think if we're all looking at this situation honestly, we can say that nothing that the school system can do can replace, an actual hug from a friend. And so that loss of physical engagement with our peers, we feel it as an adult, and our kids feel what we feel. And so I think, when I look at what can the school system do in regards to the social isolation, that is really look at how are our teachers and administration, our aides, how are they portraying the stress that they're feeling when they're with our children, whether they're teaching remotely or in person, because kids feed off of the stress of adults. And so our remote learning, it's fun. Our students are engaged. When my daughter does the remote learning days on our adaptive pauses, she's jumping and doing, jumping jacks and engaging with her classes. So there's ways to really bring energy to the remote learning. But the reality is that technology fatigue is real, and that the social isolation of the pandemic heightens the need for our families and our teachers to really engage.
Okay, it's time for closing statements. So each candidate has 1 minute for a closing statement, and we're going to reverse the order that we started in. So Kim had gone first last time, Stephen had gone last, and we're going to switch it. This time, Stephen will go first.
It's an unusual order that I don't find myself in very often. So I just want to thank the League of Women Voters for giving us this opportunity to really talk to the community. As much as we'd like to be in person and interacting with people in person, this does give an opportunity for more people to see us and hear us and know how we react to things. So thank you for the forum. I also want to thank everybody that I've participated with for the privilege of your time and your viewpoints. I think there is a diversity of viewpoints that are represented here, and that's fantastic. This is a volunteer job. It's not an easy job, and I'm happy to see that we actually have a contested race for the 4-year term, because it shows that people do want to be part of this opportunity and part of their community in this way. So thank you very much for candidates stepping up and being a part of the election process. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up is David Franzen.
Thank you, Ginger. So I also want to extend a big thank you to the League of Women Voters and the NAACP for getting us all together today. I don't know if it came across, but this is not my strong suit necessarily, talking in front of people, even via Zoom. So I think it's a good learning experience for me. So I appreciate the opportunity. Ultimately, I would like to reiterate, I'm dedicated to this community. I'm dedicated to my family, and I look forward to being granted the opportunity to serve on the board and take my passion and energy to the School Board of Education and make sure that we continue, these discussions, we continue fostering diversity, talking about different stances and making sure that ultimately, we enact the best policies for the community, whether they're, they may not necessarily be the most popular positions, but I think it's part of the board to make sure that we make the right decision regardless.
Thank you. Next up will be Chris Humbert.
Again, thank you for hosting such a great event, and thanks to the voters for dialing in again, and the candidates. Everybody contributed and brought a lot of ideas to the table. Appreciate and respect them all. I've been on this board to provide strong leadership and a common sense approach to School District 12, but most importantly, again, to always protect the dignity of every person. And just to summarize a couple of the goals again that I bring: safety, stability and growth in learning, environment for every student's growth, confidence, and preparation for the next level, financial health for the district, and transparency in communications. I hope I've earned your confidence and your vote today in what you've heard, but most important, in what our district's results have been and what they will be going forward. Again, my name is Christopher Humbert. I have the disadvantage of being the 5th person on the ballot, vote for 4. So please look for my name on the ballot. I'm hoping that you find it when you vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is James Mcgowan. Jim?
Thanks. I'd also like to thank the League of Women Voters again for bringing us together. I'd like to thank all those who submitted questions. It's been a great discussion. I hope we've been able to address your concerns in our responses. I think it's very evident that all who participated today are very passionate about the future of this great district and the students and families that comprise it. My 2 previous years on the board have been an extremely positive experience. I'm very proud of what this board has accomplished in partnership with my fellow board members, the faculty and staff, and this renewed engagement with the community. Through extraordinary circumstances, I believe we've all come together with that singular goal of maintaining a fantastic, safe students, be it in 2 different learning models, put together and staying engaged. Further, I believe through this increased collaboration with the community that we can build on this momentum, ensure that the path forward for D12 is a positive one, keeping the students and their future at the forefront of all of our decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, wrapping it up, Kimberly Doris. Kim.
Thank you. Thank you again for the time to share our thoughts, our plans, and our interest for continuing involvement on the school board. I hope that everybody definitely sees the passion that comes through, not just for the district, but for our Roselle community. In regards to my interest in being on the board, I believe that I do bring a unique perspective and one that is needed to the board in the area of being an educator myself, as well as a mental health counselor. Being able to tie these 2 worlds of a student's social emotional health with their academic potential really is a key to understanding how do we reach our students. Furthermore, I think that my record on the board has demonstrated my ability to make sound financial decisions for the district. I consistently inquire about rationale behind motions brought forward. I'm very interested and encourage the difference of opinions and the opening of conversation so we really can decide, are we making decisions that are in the best interest of our students, our families, and our taxpayers. So with your support, I do look forward to continuing to proudly serve on the school board. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you, all the candidates. Thank you to the members of the League of Women Voters of Roselle-Bloomingdale for organizing this. I'm not a member of this league and I cannot vote in this race. I don't have a dog in this show. So not that you guys are dogs, you're all wonderful. And I wish you all the best of luck. So we're going to proceed after maybe a short break. It is 10:04 by my clock, and I believe maybe we'll take a 5-minute break and then come back with our Roselle village trustee race, and where voters will be selecting 3 out of the 5 candidates. So with that, I wanted to remind the voters that there is a write-in candidate, Blythe Cami. Sorry, couldn't quite remember the last name there.
That's correct.
But there is that write-in candidate to consider as well. And best of luck to all of you.
Thank you, Ginger.
So much.
Thanks,
pleasure.
Ginger.
Thank you.
So I think we're going to take a little bit of a break, if that's okay, Roberta. Roberta's our tech guru in the background.
Would be wonderful.
So I'm going to mute and stop my video for just a few minutes while we collect ourselves and get our next set of candidates on, and then we'll start the next candidate forum.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ginger.
I'm back. If anybody is on with us today, we'll be getting started here in a couple of minutes. We have a team managing our technology behind the scenes. That's not me. I am just your volunteer moderator, trying to keep everything organized and ask the questions. There they are. Okay. Today.
Very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Today's my dad's 84th birthday. So
Happy
shout out to
birthday.
my dad.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Okay, let's see. What are we doing now? All right.
2 more minutes and then we can get going again.
Okay,
Just
thanks.
took a brief break. It's 10:13.
I'm at work right now, so I hope everyone enjoys the certified mail I'm going to be sending out on Monday.
Always like getting certified mail.
Even if it is 3 or 4 weeks late.
Oh, sorry about that.
Hey,
You haven't run into any problems, Roberta?
yeah, we received the same piece of mail that I tried to return to sender. That's it. 4 times it came to my mailbox. I finally put it in an envelope and we guessed some soul that lives at my address in Rosedale, Illinois. Hopefully we'll get their Menards rebate coupon.
Wow, we had a piece of mail we tried to send to Bartlett. It took 2.5 weeks to get there.
Hopefully that will be something that resolves itself soon. It's too important of a service. It's been around too long to not go
Agreed.
forward. But okay, let's see. It appears to be 10:15. I'm going to mute myself and take it away, Ginger.
Okay. Hi, good morning, everybody. I am your, oops, am I muted? I'm not muted, I'm on, and we are live. I am your volunteer moderator. My name is Ginger Wheeler. I am a member of the League of Women Voters of Glen Ellen. I'm not allowed to vote in this race. I don't have any stake in any of the races, so that's why I'm your moderator. Thank you for joining us. Candidate forums such as this one are sponsored by the volunteers from the League of Women Voters of Roselle-Bloomingdale in order to provide a nonpartisan venue for the general public to have an opportunity to participate in the electoral process by asking questions of the candidates about issues that concern them. This is an opportunity for civic discourse. Recordings of this event may not be used without the express written approval of the League of Women Voters of Roselle-Bloomingdale. The League will only allow audio video of this event to be broadcast in its entirety, except by the media reporting on the event. For today's virtual format, we directed those interested to email questions to the League in advance. These questions were monitored by League volunteers to be read by me, the moderator, as time allows. The League, as a general practice, conducts candidate forums in this manner to ensure the questions are appropriate and to avoid duplication of questions, as well as to maximize the time we have allotted. We do our best to read every question asked. The candidates have drawn lots in advance to determine who will give their opening statements first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. Then once we start reading the questions, the second candidate will answer first, and so on. We will continue to rotate who answers the question first after that. And then when we do the closing statements, we have planned ahead to reverse the order. Candidates' responses and questions are timed. There is a timer on the screen. They can see it. I will enforce the timing, so I may have to interrupt a speaker in order to keep things fair and equal, and I do this by thanking them, and I sometimes will thank them many times. League does not condone empty chair debates. In the case that an invited candidate cannot make it to the forum and there is only one other candidate, then the participating candidate will have the opportunity to make a 2-minute introduction, but does not receive any questions. On behalf of the League of Women Voters and the audience, we thank the candidates for participating. So today right now, we've already had one candidate forum that will, I believe, be recorded and posted to the League's website. That was for the Roselle District 12 School Board. Now we're going to hear from the Roselle Village Board of Trustee candidates. And then after that, I think we're not going to take a break and we're going to launch right into the mayor of Roselle at about 11:15. So let's get started. Let's see here. We're going to start with our first person is Thomas. We have 5 candidates, first of all. So we have I'm going to read the names of all the candidates first. We have Thomas Della Pina, Cheryl Lanisa, Barbara Sarno, Tom Prokowski. I believe that's all of them. And Tom Della Pina is going to
I'm sorry, you forgot me. I'm Lydia Galante. I'm also a candidate.
Thank you, Lydia. I'm sorry, I skipped you.
Thank you.
Thomas Della Pina, Cheryl Lanisa, Lydia Galante, Barbara Sarno, and Tom Prokowski. We have 2 Toms. So I do apologize for that, Lydia. And thank you for interrupting me on that, or not interrupting, but correcting. So we're going to get started with Tom Della Pina, who's going to read his opening statement for 2 minutes. So Tom.
Thank you, Ginger. Good morning, and thank you for joining us. I'd like to thank Ginger and Roberta, my friends at League of Women Voters, and the NAACP of DuPage for hosting this important event. My name's Tom Della Pena. I've been a resident of Roselle for 32 years. My wife Valerie and I chose to live here 32 years ago, and it's where we raised our 2 boys. I've always felt it was important to give back to your community and help other people out where you can. And I guess you could say in some small way, that was my way of hoping to make the village even better. You could start with my experience as an usher at St. Walter Church for the past 25 years. I've also been a coach, commissioner, and trustee of Roselle Medina softball and baseball organization. I am a past board member of Roselle District 12 School Board for 8 years and the president for 4 of those years. I volunteered as a board member and vice president of Lake Park Educational Foundation. And my last 4.5 years, I volunteered as a special advocate for foster children in DuPage County as their advocate in court between the judge at foster homes and DCFS for CASA of DuPage. I've always felt that by giving back to our community, you make a difference. And that's one of the things I strive to do. I've felt in this town in Roselle that our mayors, last couple mayors, and trustees and staff have always run the village in a fiscally responsible and conservative manner. I've always had trust that they would run the village in the right way. And in fact, a lot of them were personal friends of mine. And the difference in this election is that we have 3 seats up for re-election or up for election. You have 1 candidate for mayor that if he gets elected mayor, there'll be a 4th seat that'll be open. So today you're going to see a bunch of experience, different levels of experience, and different ways that people are going to talk about doing things. And I hope that you look at my experience level and vote for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Cheryl Lanisa.
Hi, I first of all want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum. It's very much appreciated. I am a longtime resident of Roselle. I've lived in the community for 25 years. My husband and I raised our family in Roselle, and we were active in volunteering throughout the school years we had. Most notably, we were part of the equipment crew and the cooking crew for the Lake Park Marching Band, which for 7 years, which was quite an enjoyable experience getting to know other people in the community through the children's activities. I also served as the treasurer for the band through those years that my children were involved with it. Not only do I live in Roselle, I also have my business here in Roselle. I do have a CPA practice, which I work from my home. I meet with and have served a lot of businesses and residents that are both from Roselle and neighboring communities. I listen when I'm working with them. I listen to their community needs that they do speak of while we're together. And my desire in running for the village trustee position is to help bring their wishes forward. I am hoping that I am bringing my years of experience of working with businesses and individuals to the table. And I hope that the role of role of village trustee to be a liaison in providing that communication between the village and all those businesses and individuals that reside in Roselle. I hope you vote for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cheryl. Next up is Lydia Galante. Lydia?
Hi, good morning. My name is Lydia Galante, and I'm running for village trustee here in Roselle. I decided to run to advocate for everybody that lives here. I think that we need new voices that accurately represent our growing community. It's really important to me that every resident is represented, from my 85-year-old grandmother to my 3-year-old son. I've lived here in Roselle for most of my life. I left as fast as I could after my Lake Park graduation, but I chose to come back as an adult to raise my family within this wonderful village. I'm focused on listening to Roselle's residents and business owners and helping to successfully navigate us through this pandemic and anything else that may arise, no matter how inflammatory or seemingly mundane. I'm very passionate about transparency within our local government, and I pledge to swiftly strike down misinformation by looking past emotion to deliver facts. I've never served on a board before, but that does not disqualify me from this position. On the contrary, I have excellent budgeting and managerial skills coupled with an eagerness to learn and serve. This position would not be a stepping stone or a hobby for me. It would be my full-time job. I'm passionate about expanding Roselle's business base and making sure that we are not just a town to drive through between Bloomingdale and Schaumburg. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Barbara Sarno.
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank Roberta, Ginger, and the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this. My opening statement would be, I have been on the board since May. I am running for re-election. My husband and I have been living in Roselle for 20 years. I think it's a great town. It's really has, a good future going. I'm also president of my homeowners association for the past 20 years. I have been attending a lot of the meetings to get information on Roselle, and it's just been a great opportunity. And I also work for Lowe's Home Improvement as a training manager. But I think Roselle is a great town to live in, and I hope to get reelected to the position. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last candidate up is Tom Perkowski.
Hi, so my name is Tom Prokowski. I'm running for village trustee. I want to thank everybody who put this on, and especially all the people who are here. It was really great to look in the participant page and see over 50 people just watching this. So it's great to see so many people engaged. A little bit about myself. I've been a lifelong resident of Roselle. I grew up here. I even commuted to college. When my wife and I got married, when we went to go buy our house, I told her she could live anywhere she wanted as long as it was in Roselle. So I never wanted to leave. For the last 6 years, I've served on the library board, the last 2 of which as president. I'm involved in several of the organizations around town, Flags for Roselle, the History Museum, the Lake Park Educational Foundation. And I really like this town. I really believe in it. I think it's a great place to live, and I want to do what I can to contribute to that, to make living here just even better than it already is. That's all. Look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. Okay, so these candidates were provided questions in advance. So they had a chance to prepare, and we're going to read through those questions first. The first person to start this is going to be Cheryl Lanisa. And the first question has to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. So the question is, and it's a multi-part question, is there a diversity, equity, and inclusion plan for this unit of government? If yes, what are its main pillars? If not, how do you plan to implement one? For example, what are the plans to recruit, hire, and retain a diverse staff? How will staff members be held to these goals? What measures should be enacted to eliminate barriers to employment for qualified individuals with disabilities? Would you undergo and would you support staffers undergoing unconscious bias training? How should the board ensure diversity in suppliers and contractors? And with that, Cheryl Lanisa will answer first. She'll have 1 minute.
Unmuting helps. The presence of differences such as race, gender, nationality, ages, disability, religion, political point of views exists in our everyday world, and we all know it. It's up to each and every one of us to ensure that those differences are embraced and not used against individuals. There's definitely a need to raise the awareness of unconscious biases that exist in our community and in the world. Becoming aware of unintentional actions is a must for all people. Once items are identified, then all involved, including both employees and officials, must work to understand and manage such hidden feelings. This includes both the intentional and unintentional communications of hostile or negative messages. Bringing together individuals with differing backgrounds benefits the community and teams by combining creative solutions from the input of others' experiences.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Sorry, don't mean to interrupt. We want to keep it fair and keep it moving along. So the next person to answer the question is Lydia Galante.
As a predominantly white community, I think it's important for Roselle to use every piece of information available to form a diversity and inclusion plan and to hold staff accountable to this plan. The U.S. Department of Labor has several free resources available to educate employers about effective strategies for recruiting, hiring, and retaining a diverse workforce. This includes qualified individuals with disabilities as well as racially diverse individuals. Everyone has an unconscious bias, whether it's from the media, from personal circumstances, environmental factors, etc. This must be addressed in our local government through unconscious bias training. I support staff and myself undergoing this training. Even if workforce diversity is achieved, an employee cannot reach their full potential without inclusion. Fostering an environment of inclusion allows every single village employee to reach their full potential, benefiting the village of Roselle and the community at large. Roselle and the village board can set goals for themselves to ensure diversity in suppliers and contractors. Making sure all job listings and bid requests and proposals are posted in multiple places is key to gaining a diverse network of contractors and suppliers. Okay, this is a 5-part question in 1 minute.
I know, I'm sorry. Those are the rules.
For the extra 2 seconds. Thank you.
Sorry, I feel bad, but the rules are the rules. Okay, so next up is Barbara Sarno. Same question.
Thank you. I think we should leave everything open to hiring people, diverse, recruiting from every level of people. And I think we should not have barriers for people with disabilities because it's really not fair to people who want to do a job and cannot do a job because they can't get into their offices or whatever. And I think we should go under training for all this diversity. I think we need to do that now as a group. And in diversity of suppliers and contractors, I think we should leave it open to all levels of people. And I think that would be a great way for the village to do all these things. And I hope to be a part of it. And I think they've been doing a great job anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Tom Perkowski.
Okay, so
I hope I pronounced that right.
yeah, Prokowski. So diversity inclusion was actually one of the pillars of the Envision Roselle program that was, put forward in 2019, kind of got put on hold a little bit with the pandemic, but it's basically a very long-term strategic plan, what Roselle will look like in 30 years. I was actually part of the process through the library. I was the library liaison for a few of the meetings, including the one on diversity, where we talked about, reaching out, making the village more inclusive for people of color, reaching out to our Polish immigrant community, groups like that. And from my own personal experience, I believe very firmly in diversity training. Every year at Elmhurst, before we can teach, we actually have to go through Title IX training. It's part of the pedagogical training that you kind of receive in grad schools. And it ended up actually being very helpful. So I have, international students, and it's like, okay, how can we make this more inclusive? Don't necessarily use colloquialisms, maybe explain things that you might assume an American student would have, but somebody who's a foreign student might not. So I believe very firmly in diversity training. And we actually had the library staff go through it last year.
Thank you. And finally, on that question on diversity, equity, inclusion, Tom Del Penna, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
You did that time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
That's okay. This is a tough one to go last on because most of the points have already been taken, but I'm going to refer a little bit to what Tom talked about. In fact, I would suggest strongly that any person that hasn't seen the Envision Roselle plan online, go to the village website and read it. It's very interesting. And even though it just started, this one pillar that they're working towards, I want to read. I don't normally like to read things. I'd rather look into the camera and talk to you, the voter, but this one's important enough that I'd like to read it. The village included diversity and inclusion as core community values that will be enacted through priority to create a cohesive and inclusive community. Roselle will support neighborhoods, schools, places of worship, nonprofits, recreation, community, celebrations, and the business community in reinforcing open and welcoming environments for all. That's the kind of community we all want to live in. Now we just have to figure out the procedures to put in place that we can all strive for to get to that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next answerer is going to be Lydia Galante. She's going to go first on this next question, which is, there are two non-binding referendum questions on the April 6th ballot in Roselle regarding the retail sale and craft growing of recreational marijuana. What is your opinion on these businesses being allowed to operate in Roselle? Lydia?
So I'd like to start by pointing out that Roselle actually has dealt with a similar issue to this before. In the 1970s, there was overwhelming opposition to the opening of Linford Winery, but now look at Linford. It's one of the big things that draws people here into Roselle. People who stay and purchase things at other local businesses before they head home. I think that Roselle should allow recreational marijuana businesses to operate within our municipality. All of Roselle would reap the benefits from the taxation of cannabis sales. And unlike wine sales, Roselle can impose a village tax on cannabis to further the tax revenue. That being said, marijuana is a legal substance in Illinois, just like tobacco and alcohol, and should be treated as such. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up on that question, Barbara Sarno.
Okay. I believe it is legal now, but I think it should be done in a way where we're not going to offend people who don't want it or who do want to use it. And I think it would be good. I think it would be good for the village because it will bring revenue to the village, but I think it should be not in a place where it's near schools or anything like that, these dispensaries. So I think it would be good for the village to have that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Tom Prokowski.
So my thoughts on this are that even though it's a non-binding referendum, whichever way the referendum goes, the board should go off of, even if it's non-binding. This is, a metric that we get to hear what the people want, what the people believe in a way that, most of the issues that come before the board won't. If it is passed, and I do support it, I agree with Barbara and Lydia that, it's great piece of tax revenue. We can tax it in a way that we can't tax the other things. But I also agree that it should be heavily, or not heavily, but regulated. So for example, if we put it in one of the more industrial areas of town where it's not necessarily on a main thoroughfare, but it's still available for the people who would like to procure it. So thank you.
Thank you. Next up on that question, Tom Della Penna.
We always have to listen to the voices of the residents and the voters before we make an informed decision. I will agree with what Tom said on that. The one caveat I'd add to that is please vote, because sometimes in these elections, when there's not a presidential election as part of it, we get very few people respond. So we're going to be making a decision based on limited information. We'd rather have all of your information. Now that we get that, once we get that information, we'll have to decide the pros and cons of doing it. Now that it's legal in Illinois, I think we should do it in our, have one in our town, at least be open to having it in our town when someone comes to us and says we're interested in putting one in. I would prefer that we stay away from the Main Street corridor and maybe put it in an industrial area. But we also need to weigh the potential costs involved. There might be some additional cost of policing in that area. So we can't just look at it as another revenue source. There's going to be some costs that are going to offset some of that. So thank you.
Thank you. And Cheryl Lanisa.
My personal opinion on the sales of the recreational cannabis is that it should be allowed, since there is a tax revenue of up to 3% that the village could partake in, and our neighboring communities are already allowing such sales. So it seems like it would not make a lot of sense to shut off Roselle and allow people to go next door to Schaumburg or to Carroll Stream or Bartlett. That said, I would pay attention to the referendum though, and I would listen to what the desire of the Roselle people's vote is from the referendum, whether if I would have to put my personal belief aside and go with what the voters are asking for. And along with what Tom Della Penna was saying, is that we need more people to get out there and vote so that the numbers of people that are voicing their opinion on this subject matter are relevant to the numbers in the community, so that that when this comes to the table, it gets voted based on the community's beliefs.
Thank you, Cheryl. I want to add about that is there was a show on ABC the other night, Soul of a Nation, I believe it's called, and they did a profile of Evanston, who's planning to use their marijuana tax revenues to pay some type of reparations. It's kind of interesting if you haven't seen that. Anyway, so now we're going on to the third question that was provided in advance. So this question is, and Barbara Sarno will go first. What measures can this unit of government take to reduce the burden of the pandemic on taxpayers and small locally owned businesses? Barbara?
Well, I think during the pandemic, we've seen a lot of things changing, and being the CARES Act came into force, we've gotten money from the government for that. We've had the water bill reduction, which is supporting the local restaurants and businesses. So I think we all want to shop locally within our town. And I think this would be a good, thing to reduce the burden of taxpayers, because I think everybody now is concerned about their taxes. And I think if we support all these small businesses that are still in business and won't have to go under, it would be a great thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Tom Prokowski.
So like Barb said, the village has made many moves towards helping residents and businesses. When the pandemic first started, they ceased the water shutoffs. They postponed the vehicle licenses. Just recently, like she mentioned, they passed the plan where, if you turn in a certain number of receipts from local restaurants, you get a rebate on your water bill. Basically, obviously, we're very limited since we are a municipal government and what we can do to directly help residents. But continuing programs like that, I believe, is the most effective way. trying to find a way to balance the need for the revenue these things generate, but with helping residents by, maybe postponing water bills, maybe giving small rebates on water bills for those who need it. Just basically variations on that theme. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Tom Della Penna.
Thank you. I think the most important thing is we need to all work towards keeping our Roselle dollars in Roselle, spend them here first. If we talk to the taxpayers and the businesses and ask them what they would like, sometimes our response as a village government is not a one size fits all. We might be doing something that we think everybody likes and it has no impact on an individual or a business. They might want something completely different. So we should talk and listen to them. A couple things that I would like to explore if I'm elected to the board is I would like to see if it's possible to maybe have a village employee spend X amount of hours per week, not a lot, but help businesses in our town look for different ways to apply for loans, low interest loans and grants. We could also look at maybe coming up with a fund, putting some money aside that we could use for low interest loans for businesses that are really struggling, with the idea that they pay that back with a low interest rate. And then also when they get back on their feet, when they're profitable again, possibly they could put some money or donations back into that fund and we could, perpetuate that into the future. Thank you.
Okay, good one. Cheryl Lanisa, same question.
I think there's many ways that the village can help small businesses through this pandemic. The first is to assist businesses to obtain the federal aid. That means to be knowledgeable within staff members or other people that can help guide those businesses. Second of all, I think encouraging the shopping and the dining, such as the recent program of the dining for the water bill reductions. I think that was a positive step. The other thing is to create resources, maybe a website for businesses that they obtain more resources, have a place to go to find such resources. Next one would be to cut costs wherever possible so that ultimately the taxing and the costs that are then filtered down to the businesses is reduced and made it more easy for them to get by on a day-to-day basis. And lastly, I think the most important thing is be available.
Thank you. Oh, when you started the lastly, I was getting nervous. Luckily it was short. Okay, that's great. And Lydia Galante, you're up next.
Thank you. I do think that Roselle has issued a lot of relief in the past year. Some of the other candidates have already touched on that. So I just want to go ahead and say that watching other communities has been really informative. I know that in Buffalo Grove, they worked with a local t-shirt shop and they did a fundraiser where you could purchase a t-shirt and part of the proceeds would go to this business whose t-shirt that you're purchasing. I think something like that in Roselle would be great. I know there are already actually a few businesses in our community that are participating in something like that through a t-shirt company in the city. But Roselle could expand this initiative to offer support to multiple businesses, not just these few that are participating. I also think residents are missing the festivals. I know the current board is talking about summer festivals. If we're not in phase 5 by August, I'd love to see like kind of a drive-through taste where people could get a platter of foods, from different restaurants to kind of push them towards visiting that restaurant. Thank you.
Fun. Lots of great ideas there. Okay, so this next question, we're going off the planned questions. These are questions the candidates have not seen in advance. And Tom Prokowski, you're going to go first. This one has to do with the COVID vaccine. The question is, the rollout to get a COVID vaccine has been challenging, especially for those who find it difficult to use technology. How will you assist people as it becomes more widely available?
I think the most prominent way you can do this is just relying on getting the message out via the mail, via other sources like the board on Roselle Road, things like that, and then ensuring that they have the contact information with the DuPage County Health Board, that they know the various venues that you can get the vaccine at. You can start getting it at Walgreens and places like that now. The main way is just making sure that the message of where you can get it and how you can get it is out there in as many forums as you can possibly have it, and make it so that you can register for it in a way that does not require a computer, that you can do it by phone, that you can even do it in person if you need to, just to make sure that it's as available as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Tom Della Penna.
Hi, unfortunately, trying to get vaccines has turned into kind of a blood sport that nobody wanted to get in. It's just that, the people that have access to the technology and have time to try it are the ones that are getting the vaccines, and the people that don't are the ones getting left behind. Sometimes some of the most unfortunate. Going to give a little shout out to my wife and the Roselle Park District Garden Club today, because the Park District and the Garden Club is a success story on that. Last week, Lynn McAteer, the director of the Park District, put together a vaccine drive, and she's got 300 people getting vaccines in the Park District on Monday. So that's something that's happened in our small town, that somebody took ownership of it, drove a plan, and pulled it off. And all those people are over 65 years old. So those are the kind of people that need the vaccine. And thank you to Lynn, thank you, Val, for doing what you do to get those people, help them get vaccinated. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheryl Lanisa.
I also believe that the technology has limited people to possibly find out where they could even get their vaccines at. Myself, I've personally registered in several places, including the DuPage County Board, only to get additional emails that came after to say to re-register. And that was frustrating, because I thought there are a lot of individuals that makes that extremely hard for them to deal with, and don't know that they're not re-registered at DuPage County any longer. That said, I think that what the village could do is phone calls. I think that we have reverse phone calls when there's an emergency or a weather alert. Maybe there is a way to do calls to let individuals know when there is some vaccines available in the community. Having them register at the village to get assistance. And if they don't know the technology to get online for these, maybe a call to the village to have somebody there help them would be appropriate.
Thank you. Next up, Lydia Galante. And if you need me to repeat the question at any time, just ask. I know, because it's
I was going to ask for a repeat. I just want to make sure I'm fully answering the question, since I've heard everyone else speak.
Yep, sure.
Thank
And
you.
I know you guys haven't heard these questions before. So the rollout to get a COVID vaccine has been challenging, especially for those who find it difficult to use technology. How will you assist people as it becomes more widely available?
So I kind of am the opposite of everyone else who's spoken. I am a little bit of a success story. I've helped my grandmother and other family members who are eligible get appointments, but people are right. It was through technology. It was through refreshing and taking the time and setting alarms for myself, things that maybe the population that's qualifying right now is unable to do so. This is something that I'd love to involve the whole board in, not just myself. It's a board of 6 trustees. We could talk about doing something maybe to teach people who don't know how to use this to use it, because realistically, not being able to do something in person, we do need to use the technology. And so therefore, helping people use the technology to get their vaccine would be something that I think the village could offer.
Great. Thank you so much. And last up, Barbara Sarno.
Yes, hello. This has been a very trying time for a lot of people to get these vaccines. And I've talked to people who are up at 4 or 5 in the morning going online. They go through everything and then it comes nothing available. But I want to give a shout out to Lynn at the Park District, because I think she's done a great job with the people over there of setting everything up, getting these people vaccinated. And I think they'll probably do another, take on more people, because they were already booked up for the one on Monday. And I think it gives a lot of people a lot of relief to get this vaccine, so we can get back to a semi-normal way of life and get back to in-person with the village board meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, everybody answered that question. So our next question is going to be on infrastructure projects. What do you see as the most important infrastructure project you must address? Why and how should it be paid for? Conversely, during these uncertain economic times, what infrastructure project can be put on the back burner? And we're going to start with Tom Della Penna.
I think the most important infrastructure project in our town is a combination of the roads and the sewers. They're not really things that you can put on hold for very long, because sometimes the short-term dollars that you save become larger long-term bills. Our village has done a pretty good job with putting reserves aside for the water mains and for the roads. I'm gonna read exact numbers because I can't keep budget numbers in my head. I'm not that good. But this year's budget for the village has $1 million for streets and $1.2 million for water mains. And they've also reserved $2.6 million for wastewater treatment expenditures. So you could look at postponing those, but the $1 million that you spend now might be 1.2 or 1.3 million by the time you actually get money again. And with budgets under pressure, I think they're going to continue to be under more pressure because of all the pandemic expenses that we have and the state and the federal government has. That means they're going to give us less money for our budget. So we need to be conservative with what we have and spend the money as we have it, not postpone it for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Cheryl Lanisa.
I think that the streets, the water, the utilities in Roselle are the most important items to make sure that we have kept the infrastructure of those up to date. That said, I do think that we have to be respectful of the budget process, and we also have to be respectful of the pocketbooks of the taxpayers here, because as the pandemic has taken a toll on everyone, I think we have to look at the infrastructure projects that are on the table and make sure that they are the most important items and that the money is appropriated appropriately to make sure that we don't overspend and that we keep people's individual expenses kept in check.
Thank you. Next up is Lydia Galante.
I think it's really important that Roselle stays on track with our 5-year capital improvement plan. I know it is a hard time right now with the pandemic fiscally, but I think the current board has done a great job at balancing the budget without any tax, fee, license, or fine increases. Some of the projects that we have going on right now are the water main replacement program, and I think that's really, essential. I don't think that we can cut something like that out. And to touch with what Tom said, if we don't finish what we're doing with these 100-year-old cast iron pipes now, something like a stoppage in service could end up costing us a lot more in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Barbara Sarno.
I think the water and the street improvement is really something essential we have to address. And like Tom said, and everyone else, the longer you let it go, the more money it's going to cost. And I think the public works people have been doing a great job with structuring everything. And I think we just need to maintain everything so we don't go in the hole, so to speak, with all this. So I think that's what should be done. We should look at that. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Tom Prokowski.
I guess I'm just going to reiterate what everyone else has said about the sewage system. It's aging. It needs to be maintained. The potential for a catastrophic problem is going to be quite big. We want to get it while it's a problem and not a crisis. So we should not cut back spending on that. If you were to do anything, potentially it would be what they have already done to a limited extent, which is postpone some of the street improvement programs kind of on that rotating basis. So that would be one place to save money. But overall, the village has done an excellent job. It's very healthy in its reserves. It's got over 50% annual expenses in its reserve fund right now. Most municipalities are lucky to get 25. So for the last 10 years since the Great Recession, the board and the staff have done such a great job preparing us for this type of moment. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I want to shift to another topic that's been in the news lately, and it has to do with the police. It says, and our first answer on this one's going to be Cheryl. What initiatives do you plan or propose to build a sense of trust between law enforcement and minority communities? And coupling with that, if you can talk a bit about body cameras to record law enforcement encounters, and what are your thoughts on releasing those recordings to the public? And the question goes to Cheryl first.
So first of all, let me say I very much support the Roselle Police and all police. I have friends whose children are police officers, and this past year has been very disturbing to see the interaction that has happened between police and individuals. And my belief on the body cameras, I believe that they are an important thing to not only protect the individuals that the police are approaching, but to also protect the police. Because I think that the individuals, the situations can escalate out of control, and you think about the risk that the police officers are taking every single day of their lives, and I think that we need to stand behind them and protect them as well.
Okay, thank you. Next up, and if you need me to repeat the question, please do ask. Lydia Galante.
Will you please repeat just so that I can answer all parts of the question correctly?
Yes. What initiatives do you plan or propose to build a sense of trust between law enforcement and minority communities? And when police are utilizing body cameras to record law enforcement encounters, what are your thoughts on releasing the records to the public upon request?
Okay, thanks, Ginger. So I think that Roselle Police already do have an open house. Obviously, it didn't happen in 2020, but I think it's important because it does nurture this healthy communication between the police and the public of all ages. However, in order to foster a good relationship between the police and minority communities specifically, I think it's important that the police come to where the minority community is comfortable. If someone already has an unconscious bias, kind of touching back to what we were talking about before, against the police, they're not going to attend this open house, but they might attend something that is in their own area, in their own neighborhood where they feel more comfortable. I think it's important that the police and the community are willing to work together for, a brighter Roselle. And I do think that the body cameras are great for police officers and for the community so that a situation, if it ever gets out of control, can be fully examined without emotion so that everyone can look at the facts and figure it out. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. Barbara Sarno.
I totally support our police force. I think they've been doing a great job, and some of the issues that we've had going on, they've addressed them. And I think the body cam is a good thing because I think it gives transparency and people can see what went on, so there's no issues there. And I just think the police are doing a great job, and possibly, as Lydia said, if we had open houses or the police get involved with different people in the community, I think it would be a great thing. So everybody's not afraid of the police. And like I said, they've been doing a great job with everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Tom Prokowski.
So this is actually something that the police have been doing really well with, I think, in the last year especially, and going back. Currently, they have a social worker on staff that's been added recently to handle certain calls and be available. I think this is something that should be expanded. A lot of other communities have done this, and it's worked out very well. And then that could help build, trust with the police. When you have an issue that calls for a social worker or a softer touch instead of having necessarily a police presence there. Also with the body cameras, I fully support them. As far as the legal process can go, it should be released to the public whenever there's an issue. And I was actually really happy the board recently approved the purchase of holsters for the police that will automatically turn on the body cameras anytime the weapon is withdrawn. So it's things like that that we should continue to look into to increase the transparency as much as possible within the strictures of the law and the legal process.
Thank you. Next up is Tom Della Penna.
Thank you. We are very lucky in our town that the Roselle police are very active and engaged in our community. It's not more than about 15 minutes. If you stand outside your house, you see a Roselle police car go by. They spend their time in their sectors. We have a full-time Lake Park police officer at Lake Park, both campuses. I mean, they interact with the kids. So if there's any issues, they can try and diffuse those before they happen. As Tom said, the mental health board gave them a social worker there. That's going to help them get more involved in the community. I 100% support the police in Roselle. I 100% support body cameras and releasing them as requested by the public. I think the greater transparency is good for the whole community. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. This next question has to do with development called the Metro 19 development. We're going to start with Lydia. Where do you stand on the Metro 19 development issue that was approved unanimously by the current board? And what is your vision for the future of Roselle that would increase, decrease, or have no effect on the population density of the village? So I'm kind of combining two questions into one. So what's your position on the Metro 19 development and thoughts on the future of Roselle in regards to population density?
Okay, great. I don't have a ton to say about the Metro 19 development, but I would love to confer with board members who approved of this project since I was not on the board then. Personally, as a resident, I'm excited for this project and its implications for our town. I think once it's completed, it will be a beautiful part of our town center, and it will be an incentive for new people to reside here. Hopefully, Metro commuter use will ramp back up in the coming months, and this project will realize its full potential. As far as population density, I don't really know how to touch on this, but I will say that, I think continuing to develop Roselle will attract more people here, bring more of a tax base in, and will bring more business into our local shops.
Okay, thank you. Barbara Sarno, you're next.
Thank you. I think this is a great project. I know we voted it on at the board at the last few meetings, last couple of months. And I think it's really good because it's bringing people out of the city into the suburbs with what's going on in the downtown area. People are working remotely. They're not going to their offices that much. And I think it's a great project. I think it's going to bring a lot of revenue to the village, and we're going to get more retail space. We're going to have more restaurants. And it's just a great opportunity, I think, for the village for more revenue. And I think it's going to, the plans look great, and I think it's going to be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Perkowski.
So I will admit, when I first heard about it, I approached the project with a bit of trepidation. I was a bit concerned. A lot of the concerns that many of the other residents have voiced about this over the last few weeks since it was approved. But, after looking at the studies, seeing, the traffic impact studies, its footprint, what it will be, looking at the plans, I am excited about it. And I think it will be a great addition to our community. As for population density, aside from a few projects like that, I would say Roselle is at a pretty good place right now in terms of population density. It's kind of still got that cozy small town feel to it that I think would be good to maintain while we try to build up that downtown area and increase the commercial residential tax base of that part of town. Thank you.
And Tom Della Penna.
Thank you. I think all of us in Roselle should be proud of the job that our village trustees and mayor have done over the last few years, because this is a company that brought an $80 million project to us. That says a lot about the future of what they think Roselle is going to be like. We don't have a lot of people coming to us with projects anywhere near that. So It's going to redevelop that whole area. Unfortunately, you can't put an $80 million project with 400 and some apartments out way on the west side of the village. They want to have it by where the train is. So that's going to increase the density in that area, which is a little bit of a detriment to it. But when you, like any other decision in village government, when you weigh the pros and the cons, I don't see why this is not going to be something that's going to be outstanding for our village. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Cheryl Lanisa.
Yes, and I too commend the current board for having put this project together. $80 million of luxury apartments does seem like a very positive thing to be coming to the community. And of course, I've spoken on tax situations a lot, and I believe that the bringing in a additional tax base is a great thing to spread the tax over more individuals. I do believe that the infrastructure in the downtown area will have to be monitored and see if we need to have additional increase as we bring in that many more people in the community. I think that it's something that over time we do have to monitor and make sure that we are consistently accommodating all the additional individuals that have been brought into the community. But I do think it was a very good project.
Thank you. Barbara Sarno is going to answer this next question first. And the question has to do with affordable housing. What policies will you pursue to support affordable housing in our community, in the Roselle community, your community?
Well, I think we should look at people now because the state of everything's in. People have lost jobs. A lot of people cannot afford to live in big fancy houses with high taxes. And I think we need to address that and get some more affordable housing in the area. But just make sure we're not renting places out and just letting 20 people move into a place. And I think we need to address that situation. But I think everybody needs a chance. And I think a lot of people want to live in Roselle and many people cannot afford to live in our town. But I think we should try to do something to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up on that question is Tom Prokowski.
So of course, the best way to approach this will be to work with developers looking to build affordable housing. There are several parts of town that could be developed for this type of project. There are also several parts of town that have already moved towards that. So, you know, it's obviously a very important issue. We want the town to be inclusive. We want, you know, people to be able to afford houses, you know, coming out of college and as young people to be able to move into town, keep the community vibrant. So overall, yeah, I believe that the best way to do this would be to, you know, look for places around town that are ready for development, find the developers who would like to move in, move these projects forward, and treat it just, you know, very similarly to how Metro 19 has been treated. So thank you.
Thank you. Tom Della Penna.
Thank you. I think we need affordable housing as well as any other housing in our town. It needs to be part of our whole overall plan. And what I mean by that is we'd like people to come in and start living in the village of Roselle in an affordable apartment. Hopefully, after they live there for a while and they do a little bit better, they move to one of our Metro 19 apartments. Then they move to a condo or a small home and maybe even to a larger home. We'd like people to stay in our village. Unfortunately, right now, we don't have enough affordable housing in our town. Some of the ones that used to be a little bit lower rent apartments have now been turned into condos and they've been sold. So that raises the price on those. So I think that's something that the village needs to look for and a way to develop more of that in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Cheryl Lanisa.
I do think that affordable housing is something that's important to all households. I believe that the individuals that, you know, as our children have grown up, they need to have opportunities to find housing that they can afford as well. And I think putting in, working with other government portions into the Department of Housing and that to find where it would be appropriate for supplemental funding for people in order to live in our community is important. I think that bringing in affordable housing brings in diversity as well. And I think that it's important for us all to live and work together. So I think affordable housing is a very positive move for our community.
Thank you. And then that was not final. Lydia is the final answer on that one. Sorry about
I
that.
thought you were going to forget about me again.
I'm not going to forget about you. I have my 1 mark out in your box.
Okay, well, I think a lot of other people touched on this. I do want to say that the village could work with people who are renting out, you know, houses, apartments, condos, that kind of thing, to educate them on Section 8 and how to accept Section 8, you know, housing from funding from people who are getting that kind of funding. That would be something that we could work with them to educate them so that more things in our area, so more people can come to our area and can afford it. I also think that we can touch on taxes really quick here. Do we want taxes in Roselle to be raised? You know, personally, I don't, but I think that's something that keeps housing affordable. You know, maybe you can afford to put a down payment on this house and purchase this house, but can you afford the taxes year by year? So that's also something that we need to look at if Roselle is thinking about a tax increase or something like that.
Great, thank you. Okay, we're going to do closing remarks now. It's gone by so fast. These questions have been great. There's so many more I wish I could have gotten to. And your answers have all been really great too. So thank you for that, candidates. It's so encouraging to see such thoughtful people putting themselves out there and running for office. So we're going to do closing remarks now. They're 1 minute, and we're going to go in the reverse order that we went before. So Tom Prokowski is going to go first.
So I just want to start off by thanking everyone again who put this together and all the people who watched. I look forward to continuing this campaign, continuing to talk to people about what's going on around town. And if elected, I just look forward to continuing being able to serve my community, working to try to make it better. It's the work that I've been doing, you know, for the last 6 years on the library board, trying to do everything we can there, trying to help out in all the organizations I can around town, the volunteer time, just all of this comes together, and, you know, this is our home. We want to make this as wonderful a place to live as we possibly can, to make it so that other people want to come here and join us here. And the only way we can do that is if we work together and continue to move Roselle forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Barbara Sarno.
Thank you to Roberta, Ginger, and the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this. It's been great. And I look forward to being reelected to the board. And I think Roselle is a great town. And I think there's so much more to be done here. And I think whoever gets on the board, we have a great group. And I think we'll all survive and get much stronger through this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Lydia?
I'd like to say a big thank you to the League of Women Voters of Roselle-Bloomingdale for hosting this forum and for the viewers who are making local government a priority right now. Thank you to those who submitted questions. I think this was a very informative discussion. Also, thank you to the other candidates. I've definitely heard that some towns have had some not so great discussions with some not so nice comments, and I just want to say thank you to everyone for being so polite. I'm eager and willing to listen to the needs of the public and combine that with the village's vision for a prosperous Roselle. Unlike some of my opponents, being on the village board would be a full-time job for me, and I'm looking forward to that task. Without the distraction of full-time employment, I'm able to completely dedicate my service to the citizens of Roselle. I've enjoyed speaking to residents during this campaign period, and I look forward to continuing to do so should I be elected. I think my unique leadership qualities and distinctive points of view would be a huge asset for the village of Roselle. To the voters, please consider voting Lydia Galante for trustee. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. Next up, Cheryl Lanisa.
Yes, I'd also like to thank the League of Women Voters for putting together, organizing this event and allowing everyone to share their perspectives. I hope I've completely answered all your questions and shared with you who I am and what skills I have and would be bringing to the board. I'm hopeful to be given the opportunity to serve Roselle. I do believe that each and every candidate that is running for these positions brings something unique to the table. And I do wish that all those who have expressed a desire to be a part of the board will continue to participate in the community government no matter what. Please do consider giving me your vote in the upcoming election. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. And finally, Tom Della Penna.
Well, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you again to the League of Women Voters and the NAACP of DuPage for hosting this. Thank you to the viewers for sitting through yet one more Zoom call when I'm sure that's probably the last thing you wanted to do on a Saturday morning. To me, it comes down to a couple of things. One, if you think my background and my experience level would be an asset as a village trustee, please vote for me. If you think the other candidates' background and expertise and level of experience would make them better candidates than me, I ask you to vote for them. Frankly, our village deserves nothing less. So I appreciate your time and I hope I earn your vote today. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to all the candidates. Wonderful job. I'll remind the voters, you're going to be voting for 3 of these 5 candidates. And I think we're going to roll it right into the mayoral race at this point, which was supposed to start a few minutes ago. But Roberta, did you want to say anything?
Thank you to all the trustee candidates. We really appreciate your participation, and you're going to make it a really hard choice come April 6th or sooner if you have your mail-in ballot, or when early voting starts at, well, it's actually started at the Wheaton Fairgrounds. That's it. Anyway, aren't you glad you asked me to talk? I'm going to go back behind my curtain.
I'm actually
folks.
interested
Thank
in
you
this.
all.
So the early voting is at the Wheaton Fairgrounds now?
Correct. And then it starts. Let me check lwvrb.org for when it starts at Stratford Square and the other local voting places, and I'll come back at another time.
A really good plug for the website, and noticing that these candidate forums are being taped and will be posted on the website.
Correct.
Yeah, in fact, you missed them or you wanted to point some of your family members to go and pay attention so that they can also, family or friends, so that they can also go and make an informed voting decision. So we're going to launch into our mayoral race now, and we have 3 candidates for mayor. Those candidates are, hold on a second, get my mouse to work here. Okay. We have Pete Pellegrino, David Pileski, and Wayne Domke. And I believe they're all going to be joining us today.
Good morning.
Hello.
Good morning.
Hello.
Howdy doody.
Hello. Nice to see you all. So we had drawn lots beforehand, and Pete was chosen to go first, followed by David, and then Wayne. And the rules that I read before apply. All the candidates saw the rules and signed off on them ahead of time. They got 3, they'll each gonna have 2 minutes of an opening statement, and we're going to start with Pete. So I guess we'll just launch right into it. And Pete Pellegrino, if you will, take the floor and your 2-minute opening statement. Thank you.
Good morning. I'd like to thank the League for putting this event together. It is a great service to the community, and I am looking forward to addressing the questions raised today. I am running for mayor because I have called Roselle home for over 20 years. I have raised my family here and now want to give back to the community and use my 25 years of business management and leadership experience to lead Roselle. Our primary focus should be to successfully emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic. I will create a Restart Roselle plan to help both businesses and residents. For businesses, my multifaceted plan, business license reductions or deferments, and also assisting them in tapping into the large amount of grant money that goes unused each year. For residents, my plan includes a sales tax holiday, a reduction in water rates, reduction or postponement of vehicle sticker license fees, and direct payments to taxpayers by isolating budget items that can be saved or deferred. We simply cannot ask our residents for more at this time. We must provide them the support network and assistance they need. In regards to community involvement, I would encourage more participation by residents in the decision-making process, develop a village mobile app, and promote activities and events within the village to build a strong community fellowship, especially as we rebound from the COVID-19 pandemic. I would bring creative ideas to future development in Roselle and listen to the needs of our residents and not focus solely on high density housing or potentially a hotel. I would also reduce our reliance on TIFs. I would promote ideas like an Amazon Fresh, Trader Joe's, or even a small family friendly entertainment district. To flourish as a community, its residents must feel safe. I will prioritize maintaining Roselle's excellent public safety and dedicate the time and resources to ensure we have the best trained, best equipped, and most reliable public safety. As an outsider, I can lead with no ties, promises, or prior commitments. I can act fairly and objectively to promote and implement change. As mayor, I would view my role as the voice between the residents and government agencies. I will always have the needs of our residents first. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is going to be David Pileski.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you to the league, our moderator for today, and most importantly, our residents tuning in. I'm David Pileski, and I'm passionate about our community because Roselle has been a part of the fabric of my entire life. 100 years ago, my family moved to Roselle, and today I'm proud to live a few hundred feet away from the house they built with their own two hands. Being involved in giving back to our community has been a part of our DNA, and that's why I'm motivated today to be your next mayor. We've come a long way from a small farming town to a bedroom community, and now one that's growing a vibrant local business community. I'm called to service because I want to honor that rich history we all share as we adapt to our changing world and write the next chapter of our history. Growing up, watching the transformation of our downtown inspired me to learn how communities grow and develop, leading me to attend and graduate from the University of Illinois with a degree in urban and regional planning. Returning to Roselle with my education in hand, I began to reacquaint myself with the community through a new lens. I volunteer at and serve currently as the chairman of the Roselle Community Food Pantry, where I've witnessed the need that exists in our senior community. I served on the Zoning Board of Appeals, where I had to find the middle ground between resident requests and our zoning regulations. And I've had the honor of serving the community as a village trustee. As trustee, I've made it a point to seek out residents where they're at, instead of expecting them to come to me, and always seek to implement fiscally responsible policies that benefit our community. Be it small changes like having additional information added to our water bill to spearheading the Envision Roselle 2050 plan. I'm always dedicated to meeting the needs of today while we plan for the future. Today, our world is wildly different than what we could have ever imagined, but Roselle's assets remain steadfast. Today, we need innovative leadership that can provide a clear vision for our future. And as mayor, I'm dedicated to making Roselle the best version of itself. Together, we can build a strong Roselle that is a destination for small business owners and residents alike. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Wayne Domke.
Hey, good morning. Good morning. Thank you for having us on the League of Women Voters. It's a great institution. You guys are, you've encouraged a lot of people to run. I'm running for mayor of Roselle because I've lived in Roselle since 1995. I've loved what the village offered for services, a wholesome community environment, and really great schools. Once we settled in, I became an elected commissioner with the Roselle Park District, served there for 11 years, and finally was elected to the board in 2011. My priorities in government are to move forward is to increase the government transparency by sharing information more so with the residents, aggressively market the Roselle to attract first-class businesses and food stores, protect property values, encourage smart development to expand the village's tax base, demonstrate fiscal responsibility while providing superior services to residents, as we have done since I've been on the board. Be approachable to members of the community. I can be a full-time mayor because I'm retired. Continue to work with the board and staff as a team as we have done. And that was with David too. We've done that for the last 4 years and have made a lot of accomplishments. Moving forward beyond the pandemic, I see a great opportunity for Roselle to rebuild what we have started with our comp plan, our comprehensive plan, and as well we have to do with a new strategic plan in 2021, which does include working within our budget. As mayor, I'd like to reinstitute the coffee with the board. I think that was a mistake to end that. Organize ad hoc board advisory committees from Roselle residents and professionals, create a Lake Street Merchants Association, work with local mayors to form a more regional plan for our shared boundaries, and participate in marketing Roselle in conventions and corporate headquarter visits. Finally, go out and vote. My history and my testament of who I've been will tell you who I will be as a full-time mayor for Roselle. Thank you.
Thank you. You timed that perfectly. Okay, so we have 3 questions that were sent in advance. So these candidates had a chance to review this and plan for their answers. And for the first person to answer, we're going to start with David. This question is, how do you plan to reduce expenditures and increase revenues?
So I think this is a great question. Back when the recession hit, the board really did a lot of work to right size the village. And so I think it's really difficult when you look at the budget today, where can we cut? I'm not saying that there aren't room for improvement or whatnot, but when you look at our budget, about 73% of our expenditures are all related to personnel. That's salaries, that's benefits and whatnot. And unless we're going to dramatically decrease the size of our public safety department, we're not going to see a lot of savings that are going to amount to much. Now, what I think we really need to focus on is how do we grow our business community? And I think that's about making ourselves a great destination for local businesses. I've always proposed having an entrepreneurship program where we can provide these small business owners with mentors that are experts in our community that can provide pro bono services to help them elevate their business and increase their productivity. We can then recruit and retain more businesses and help grow that. And we can start to reduce this tax burden that's been focused on residents up until recently and start to share that across the community more broadly.
Thank you. Next up is Wayne.
Yeah, thank you for these questions in advance because it gives us a chance to write them out. We're pretty austere right now, as David alluded to. I think one of the things we have to do is fully staff our departments so we can try to eliminate the overtime that we're spending, minimize the cost of outsourcing by doing more in-house work, continue to invest in IT because that does raise the efficiency of the staff we have employed. Evaluate the proper hours that the village should stay open. Possibly we could tailor that more to the needs. Keep the preventative maintenance going because it's always cheaper to do preventative maintenance than it is to rebuild. Continue competitive bidding on projects, seeking updates to existing contracts. And to increase revenue, welcome and assist with projects like Metro 19, seek state and federal grants as they become available, have a presence at marketing opportunities, and anticipate rewards from the creation and development of the 3 TIFs.
Thank you. Okay, everybody answered that question.
I haven't yet.
I'm sorry, Pete, you're absolutely right.
No problem.
I've been doing this since 8:45 this morning.
Didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's okay. No, thank you for calling me out on that. Okay, so Pete.
Thank you.
Turn. Same question. How do you plan to reduce expenditures and increase revenues?
Thank you. I've taken the time to go through the Roselle's 232-page budget. As a CPA, I like to get into those details. I'm sure that as I went through the budget, there are places within our budget that we can save money. There's always, if elected, I would get into the detail and find places where we can save money, increase efficiencies, and do targeted budget cuts without affecting our essential services. Within the capital improvements budgets, there's about $6.5 million of improvements planned for 2021. I would prioritize those and only do the ones that are a matter of public safety or public health. The rest we would have to defer. We need to spend within our means and not rely on additional taxes or higher debt. In order for revenue growth, I think we need to attract new businesses into our community so that we can make it more of a destination location. There's only so much we can expect from our residents, so we need to increase our tax breaks by bringing in businesses that will attract other people to our community and not just our residents.
Thank you. Okay, now everybody's answered that first question. The second question that was provided ahead of time, Wayne's going to answer first. what led you to run for this position? Considering this, what priority will you first pursue for change in this municipality?
Well, quite obviously, I ran for the board and all the other things I've been involved with for my love for Roselle. I've loved Roselle since before we moved in here because my aunt and uncle used to live here too. Served for 20 years and I have leadership experiences I can put into practice. I have an MBA in business from Lake Forest Graduate School. And I have time now as I'm retired to do the job right. I have life experiences that include hardships that I negotiated through in my life. I'm blessed with family support and have no other political ambitions. What I would probably do first, the first order of business would be with the onboarding of staff, because we're losing an administrator and we're getting new board members. To begin work on a new 3-year plan and a new strategic plan that we need to do in 2021. And get board meeting information out quicker and with better timing to the board members so that they have more time to study what we need to do. That's some of the things I would do originally, and I'm out of time.
Thank you. Thank you for noticing that. Okay, next is Pete Pellegrino. Same question.
Thank you. I entered the mayor's race because I believe we need a new direction, a new vision, and a new leadership in local government. The status quo needs to change, and that change is best led by a political outsider. As an outsider to the political system, I can lead with no ties, no promises made, no allegiances, or no commitments. I can act fairly and objectively to promote and implement change. I simply will not tolerate any abuse of powers or any insider deals. I believe we need to do a better job of encouraging different viewpoints and listening. We need to move away from politics and recognize our areas of common ground and not just stress our areas of disagreement. I believe once we do that, we will find more common ground than we think, and I will create that culture that will facilitate and encourage this to happen within Roselle and lead it into the future to be more of a government centered for the people, encouraging participation from the people. Thank you.
Thank you. And David Pileski.
Absolutely. I think 2020, we can all agree, brought a lot of challenges. We had a shooting in town. We had a lot of issues with the pandemic. And, you know, on the bright side, we actually welcomed our first daughter into our lives. And so looking at Roselle and where we were dealing with the challenges, I felt that, like Pete, we needed fresh leadership to help bring Roselle forward. And so I think that's where I really bring this unique perspective of having worked on the board, understand how village government works, but not having been ingrained in that culture and being able to still bring the village forward in a different direction. I think the biggest thing we need to do is communicate more clearly and promptly with the public to make sure we can reestablish the trust, because there's a lot of skepticism out there. And that's the first priority, because anything else we do won't mean much if we don't have the trust and the backing of the community at large. And I think one thing that I want to make very clear, because it seems it's been coming up a lot more this week and it was mentioned earlier, but my only ambition here is to make Roselle the very best community it can absolutely be. I don't care for partisan politics. I care about Roselle. And I think we can have a real impact making lives of Roselle's better today.
Thank you. Okay, so where are we at now? Oh, geez. Everybody answered that question, right?
Yeah.
Next, we're on number 3. So the third question you guys got ahead of time, and Pete is going to answer this first. The question is, do you believe the board communicates effectively with the community at present? As mayor, what would you change about the communication strategy of the Board of Trustees with the community, if anything? And Pete, I think you're first.
Thank you. I think we do need to do a better job in communicating with our residents. I believe a better community is created through the involvement and empowerment of its residents. The process of local government needs to be more open, transparent, and interactive. My role will be to promote the priorities of the residents first and foremost. I will use a variety of technology platforms to promote more communications to and from the residents. I would lead the development of a robust mobile Village of Roselle app. The app would include functionality for residents to communicate directly with myself, trustees, and key Roselle staff so that we can get the critical feedback we need before we actually make decisions. I will also create resident subcommittees to gather input on important issues. Empowerment is what promotes the bettering of our community. I will listen to our residents and create the culture that encourages, promotes, and supports community involvement and empowerment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, David.
So I touched on this in the last answer, and I think communication is really important. We've gone away from some best practices that I think we can improve upon. Unlike Wayne, I think coffees with the board started to get stale, but I think we need to reinvent those. One thing I've been doing during my campaign is we've been doing virtual Q&A sessions live on Facebook. I have by far more people attend those than I've seen at a coffee with the board when we were doing them before. And I think the important thing is residents are busy. They're working 9 to 5. They're out there. Their kids are really busy. And to hold an event on a Saturday morning is kind of arbitrary. We need to be engaging residents digitally, virtually, and going to where they're at. One other thing I'd like to introduce is we currently have a Chamber of Commerce liaison. I think every board member should be a liaison to another organization or nonprofit in the community, because as 7 people, we can be involved in the lives of residents and get the pulse better than just one of us or having people come to a meeting at Village Hall. And I think the more we engage and have this servant leadership style, we can communicate better and more effectively with our residents.
Great, thank you. And Wayne Domke.
So we sure could do a better job of communicating. I am going to agree with David on the trustees being a liaison to different organizations, not just the chamber. That has a lot of power and impact. I also wanted to say about this pandemic, the way it rolled out and the way the Park District has helped the Roselle residents. That replicates something that Addison, Illinois is doing with Code Red. And what they do is they have residents that are signed up either online, cell phone, or landline, and if necessary, to reach out to the people by using phone banks for any kind of emergency. So getting together with residents, regardless of what kind of communication they would need, we need to be able to get the word out to them. And just basically, when work orders are called in, for whatever reason, I think residents should be, we should reply to them and keep them up to date on whether that work is going to get done or not. And maybe more community surveys just to touch base with where people are thinking.
Thank you. I just want to remind the candidates to mute your mic after you talk, just so there's no like distracting noises when your fellow candidates are speaking. So this question came in by text. I think I'm going to get this one out of the way so I don't forget it. And maybe it's something that's important to a core group of people in your constituency. The question is, the proposed trucking headquarters at Irving Park and Rosenberg Roads is actually in Schaumburg, but Roselle residents living close by are concerned. What is your position on the potential project, and how would you ensure that the impact to the village's residents is minimized? And we're going to start with David.
Yeah, I think unequivocally, I'm opposed to it. It's going to have a negative impact on our residents' lives, not to mention the potential environmental concerns being that this is on wetlands territory. You know, as much as we try to collaborate with our fellow municipal boundaries and our other communities, we know at the end of the day, they're looking out for their self-interest. Schaumburg wants to do what's going to help Schaumburg because at the end of the day, they want the revenue for themselves. It's not like we're going to get any of that. And we need to be very aggressive in negotiating, but also doing things to protect the residents to the absolute most that we can. And so I'm absolutely 100% against it. It's similar to me like the ComEd power lines. These are no-brainer issues that hurt our residents. It's going to hurt our property values and a quality of life. And we need to do everything possible in our means to prevent this from happening.
Thank you. And Wayne? Also, before you start, you need to unmute, but I wanted to just say these questions you folks have not heard before. So these are answering kind of coming from, you know, first time of hearing question. So if I need to repeat the question, please ask.
Sure. Am I up? So of course, no one wants to take out open space. Roselle is almost like a town that's surrounded by cornfields, at least in our minds it is. When Schaumburg came to us over a year ago, and David and I were both on the board, it was basically to tell us what they had planned. They planned on putting it as far to the northeast corner of that property as possible. And they said the lighting would be zoned down, there'd be fencing put up, there'd be plenty of natural boundaries between the truck center and the residents, and also that they wouldn't run these trucks refrigerators overnight. So they tried to relax us and tell us that this was a good project, but it's not a great project for Roselle. And that's why I'm wondering if more regional discussions are done between the mayors of different towns to make sure that nobody is adversely impacted. Even our developments in Roselle do not put big structures next to residential.
Okay, thank you. And Pete Pellegrino, same question.
I'm 100% opposed to this development. I think there's going to be a tremendous negative impact on both the traffic, environmental, noise, lighting. As either David and Wayne both mentioned, I mean, Schaumburg has its own plans, and they're going to proceed with what they think is best for them. But I think we should be able to put up as much resistance as this is possible. It is essentially in Roselle, even though it's Schaumburg. But I think the negative impacts of this type of development is going to have a real bad impact on both our property values and life within Roselle. My corporate facility is located next to a very large trucking, and those trucks are in and out all day, all night, all hours of the morning. They have the refrigeration units working at all times. I think we need to do whatever we can to limit or prevent this from happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Wayne is going to answer the next question first. And the question has to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. What are the plans to recruit, hire, and retain a diverse staff, and how will staff members be held to these goals? Wayne, and you need to unmute.
Sorry about that. So diversity has not been a topic we've discussed on the board, to be quite frank and honest with you. We don't have any restrictions on who we hire. We try to hire people who are the most qualified, and many times that can be different people. It doesn't matter what color they are, what ethnicity they are. Well, most of our staff probably replicates the population of Roselle right now. So I think, having listened to the trustees discuss this too, I think moving forward with the new board and being mayor, I think this is something we need to look into and find out where we're lacking. Because quite frankly, I don't think we've spent enough attention on that subject, even for me to answer that question. Maybe, we can develop that team as a team.
Thank you. Next, Pete Pellegrino.
Hi. From the village perspective, I can't answer that question because I'm not involved in village government at this point, but I can answer it from my business experience. As a leader of a corporation, we've already had to walk through this issue. We've already implemented the types of plans that are needed for more diversity within the workplace. We've gone through sensitivity training. We've gone through recognition of more open applications. We've brought in resources to help model efficiencies in bringing together more diversity within the workplace, and our workplace is very reflective of that. So all I can do is I can bring the experience that I've had from my workplace into the Roselle government and try to implement the same things that we've already had to do at an organizational level to address this issue. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And David.
So I think diversity means different things to different people. And when we look at our community in Roselle, we've done a great job of trying to identify how we can recruit those candidates. So in our police department, for instance, we've recruited people who speak Polish, for instance, because of our population base. And even if we look at in areas where traditionally women are underrepresented, such as engineering and public works, our new public works director is a woman, and our assistant public works director is also a woman. I think we've done a great job in trying to be progressive in that sense. The Envision Roselle plan, which was a collaboration between both the village, all of our school districts, all of our park districts, the library district, put forth this as a goal. And I actually serve on that subcommittee today. And we're having conversations about what should we be doing as not only a village, but as an entire community, because we have 10 different taxing bodies and we should all be working together to address this, because this isn't just a Roselle issue. This is a community-wide issue. And so I'm proud to serve on that subcommittee representing the village, working with the public library, our schools to figure out this solution. We're actually meeting this Tuesday to kind of discuss some of those 5-year, 10-year, and 20-year goals.
Thank you. Pete Pellegrino, you're going to answer the next question first. And this is still on the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. What is your experience serving the needs of a diverse population? And as mayor, how will you ensure that all community voices are heard? What are your thoughts on bringing people together?
Well, first and foremost, I think we need to hear from everybody within the community, regardless of the social, economical, or ethnic background. I think we need to foster that communication. I think once you foster that communication, that you see that you're being receptive to the different people that are coming up. I think what we need to do is spend more time listening to each other. I think if you create the culture that we allow everybody to speak and we listen to each other and we respect each other's opinions, I think there will be more trust that is established. Once we establish that trust within the community, I think then that will foster even more engagement with different groups. And I think the more we can do to foster the communication and the trust within our village, the more then we can bring people of different backgrounds into participation and getting their voices heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is David.
I think Pete hit it right on the head. It starts with listening, because if we go in with our own notions or ideas and don't give people an opportunity to share their perspective, we've already lost that battle. In my role at the food pantry, we're dealing with some of the most underserved populations locally. These are people that might be immigrants. They come from different backgrounds. They have different cultural norms. There's language barriers. And so that has given me a lot of time to understand and work through how do you better engage and service that group of our population. I'm also really proud in the corporate world as a leader who manages a team. I have a 100% minority team. I've recruited these people and I've cultivated their talent because I think it's valuable and it drives a better end product. And so both from a professional, from a volunteer perspective, it's something that I'm passionate on, walking the walk. And I think we can apply those same principles here in the village.
Great. Next up is Wayne Domke.
As far as diversity, it starts out in my family. I have a granddaughter that's an African-American girl. She's going to be a gynecologist. She's going to college at the University of Miami of Ohio. We're very proud of her. I also have a I have a daughter-in-law that's from Puerto Rico. So we have diversity in my family. I'm used to working with many different people who I've had in my business life. I've employed African Americans. I've employed Latinos. I work with them all the time in my past, and I still know how to do it even now. I can say this too, that when I was the basketball coach, I was blessed with sorry, I got a phone call. I was blessed with being the coach always of African-American high school boys. And not only were we a good basketball team, but I was a very good coach to them and gave them something they were missing in their life.
Okay, so everyone answered that. Did everyone answer that question?
Yes.
We're good on that one. Okay. So now, sorry, I got distracted by the phone. What is the next question? First of all, let me say that David's going to answer this first. What is the most salient issue facing the village right now, and how should it be approached? The most salient.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think first and foremost, we need to get through this pandemic. Our businesses are suffering. They have a lot of challenges. And I think we're seeing it even from a resident perspective. People want to get vaccinated. So I think we need to be aggressive in pursuing ways that we can provide relief and support the business community immediately. And as a village, do things like the Park District did to connect people with resources to get vaccines. I think other communities have opened up hotlines to help people get appointments. It shouldn't be a barrier because you don't own a computer or know how to work a computer. It's very passionate to me. My father's 80 80 years old. He still has a flip phone and he hates using it. He just usually lets it die. And so like we need to help these people who are the most vulnerable. Once that is subsided, because the COVID pandemic will go away at some point. We can't say when, but it will. Infrastructure is a huge problem. I think we have a ticking time bomb that we're about to pass off to the next generation, and it's either going to result in astronomical fee increases if we don't get it under control. Our water mains are old, our streets are expanding, and they might need to be repaired in extreme ways. We need to get a better grip on that and figure out how we can finance that, not on the residents' backs.
Thank you. Wayne, and if you need me to repeat, just ask.
No, I'm going to probably just basically reiterate what David said. First of all, the COVID thing coming out of it, we don't even know. This is, the closest thing I had in life to this was the polio vaccine when I was a kid. I've never seen anything like this, and none of us have, really. We don't know how we're going to come out of this. We don't even know if there's going to be like booster shots next year. Are 340 million Americans going to have to get shots again next year? So getting this through, and so far our restaurants have kind of persevered. They've only lost maybe 20% of their business, so they're still hanging in there. Thank God for that. And then, of course, what's going on under the streets? Who cares about what's going on under the streets until it starts bubbling up out of the blacktop? So we've got to take care of that. We don't waste water. I think it's only like 7 or 8% of our water is lost. So we're not like other communities that haven't paid attention, but we got to stay on top of it. And it's probably why our water bills are so high right now, is we've got to pay money for the next generation.
Thank you. And Pete, salient issue.
Very, very salient, and thank you for the question. I'm probably going to go over some of the things that David and Wayne have already said. COVID is obviously the first thing we need to deal with. We have to get our businesses and our residents back on their feet, and I've mentioned some ideas previously on how I would do that. The next step is, this vaccine. We need to do whatever we can to help the vaccine roll out. I know our Park District has done some great work in getting some sites up for getting vaccines. Recently, the state announced some partnerships they've done with local healthcare providers. There's some new mass vaccination sites that are coming up in, I believe they're Des Plaines, Arlington Heights, and Wheaton. We need to find a way to get the most vulnerable people to those vaccinations. I know some of the online challenges are difficult for some people. Maybe we can provide some assistance in getting people to those vaccination places or helping them sign up. Once we get through that, yes, and there's other issues we need to address as far as infrastructure items. But I think until we know what the post-pandemic reality is going to be, it's going to be hard for us to answer those questions. So we need to get to where we are through the pandemic first. Thank you. Sorry, I went a little over.
That's okay. Thank you for noticing that. Okay, so I want to move it to a different topic now. This is about 2 non-binding referendum questions on the April 6th ballot in Roselle regarding the retail sale and craft growing of recreational marijuana. What is your opinion on these businesses being allowed to operate in Roselle? And we're going to start with Wayne. Make sure you unmute, Wayne. Wayne, you were, oops.
I'm sorry.
We lost Wayne. Come back, Wayne. You need your camera on too.
Okay, I'm trying.
There
Okay,
you
there
go.
it is.
All right, we'll start the timer.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's this is that recreational marijuana question.
Yeah, we put it on the ballot because a year ago we tabled it because we didn't really want it to be just 6 people and a mayor voting on it. This is a paradigm shift for Roselle. So what we want to do is we put it into voters' hands, come out and voice your support or not support. We need to know this. This is a question we need to know. We need to know how the other businesses in town are going to feel about this. That's something we should be finding out. And in my limited research of Addison and Schaumburg, I have to say that there is no increased crime around the marijuana facilities that they have. So that's one thing we could take off the board. If we did have it, I'd want to have major restrictions on location. Of course, there's some state mandates on that, but also I'd like it to be a really honorable business, not just something that's not a big investment. I'd like to see a nice place.
Okay, thank you. Next, Pete.
Hi, thank you. I'm going to echo first something that Wayne said. I think what's important is that this is really an issue that needs to be decided by the residents of our community. I'm hoping that the residents of Roselle take time in investigating this issue and, more importantly, come out and vote. This is an issue that really needs to be decided by more than just a handful of voters and then a village board. That said, I will support whatever the will of the people is, because at the end of the day, that is what the mayor's job is. From my personal opinion, I don't believe it's the right time to do this. I think we need to do some more research on the actual amount of revenue that's increased. If you look at some of the details that you have from the data at a state level, it's hard to determine how much additional revenue it is actually going to create, and also some of the other impacts. But that said, if that is what the people want, then I would certainly support it, and just try to find a location that's not by schools, that is less traffic and not as visible as our downtown area. Thank you.
Thank you. And David, same question.
Yeah, I mean, I think unequivocally, we're all going to agree, whatever the voters decide is what the village board should pursue. I won't skirt around the issue. I was in favor of it from when we first considered it. The thing to me is we constantly talk about we need to find new revenue. No one wants to find other ways to increase it. This is a slam dunk thing in my case. If you were to allow this in the village, we could actually put that money towards paying our public pensions, which, while funded well, could be getting close to being fully funded, and that would take a huge burden off of us and have money that we could redirect to the important things that we need for residents or reduce fees for residents. I think there's ways that we do it. There's tools. Doing it as a special use would allow us to have all the oversight needed, so we could evaluate each applicant based on their merit. So that way it would go to the Planning and Zoning Commission, which has a group of our neighbors who can evaluate and look at it, and then it would also have to go to the board for approval. So we have more checks and balances in there than just saying it's allowed, it can go up anywhere. I think anything without restriction is naive to do, but a special use permit is the exact use for this. That would be perfect.
Great, thank you. We're going to start with Pete on this next question, and this has to do with home rule. What are your thoughts on home rule for this village? Roselle is studying it. Hanover Park is a home rule community.
I think we need to do more research into home rule. I mean, obviously there's a restriction on home rule that if you're under 25,000 residents, it needs to be approved by a referendum of the residents. I think there's advantages and disadvantages to home rule. I think we need to do a good job in educating our homeowners before voting on it. I was pleased to see that the board actually took that off the referendum for this year. On a personal note, I think home rule could have some advantages, but I would only be in support of it if we were able to put some guidelines in place that prevent government overreach and also additional taxes. One of the first things you hear about communities that go to a home rule prior to their 25,000 residents is that one of the things they would do is increase the sales tax, because right now sales tax is limited if you're not a home rule. So I wouldn't want us to propose a home rule and then all of a sudden our 1% sales tax would go up. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, David.
I think at its fundamental core, home rule is a question, do you trust your neighbors? You elect residents to be on the board and to be mayor, and if you don't trust the people you're electing, then you should have no reason to trust them with home rule authority. I explicitly asked us, and the board did vote to postpone the home rule referendum because I think we owed residents more information. Now, that isn't to say I don't think that we've done a good job. We've been passing balanced budgets for years now. We've been very fiscally sound in our policies, and we never do anything that we believe would hurt our residents. And so I think at the end of the day, what we owe residents was more answers. I think one thing I would like to see if I were elected mayor is every board item that we see, we have a series of things at the bottom of each packet item. Is this budgeted? What's the impact? And I would also like to add, what would be the home rule implications of that? So that way residents can start to understand in our daily business how that would change if we had that authority. And I would like the board to adopt and approve a policy before having anything on the referendum to show what authorities they would curtail and give up so that way residents understand what they would and would not elect to use that authority for.
Thank you. Wayne, home rule.
So home rule was deferred, and probably appropriately, because we probably weren't going to roll out the full plan to make it available to vote educated wise for our residents. If there's a threat to the community like there was, that spurs on the talk of home rule. And that's where we were at when the Picton murders happened, is that we thought that maybe home rule would help protect us. Since then, we put some zoning in place that makes those B&Bs a little harder to rent out. So right now, I would say being tabled is a good idea. As time goes on, we'll see where our population goes. If we're over 25,000, then it could happen. I think trusting your local elected officials, we would be trustworthy. We'd have to try to put as much safeguards as we could legally put in there so that taxes aren't increased inappropriately.
Thank you. Okay, we've got time for a couple more questions, I believe. I wanted to shift to, we're kind of on this topic of home rule, and maybe this is related, maybe it isn't. Under what circumstances are no bid service or procurement contracts ethical, if ever? That's the question, and we're going to start with David.
So this has been something that I think was really important for me to learn being a trustee. And I think from the outsider's perspective, I definitely had a very different view of this until I was elected. Why would you ever do a non-bid contract that feels like it's corruption running amok and all that? But what you find is there's really some very specific needs that the village has, and there's not a lot of bidders. So like we're right now under a multi-million-dollar upgrade of our sewer treatment plant. This has been required by the Illinois EPA and the federal EPA for us to do. Communities all across Illinois are dealing with this. But when you come to sewage treatment, you might need a very specific fan or very specific pump, and there might be only one vendor that makes it. And so a lot of these instances that come up, it's because it's very specialized and it's a niche market where there's only so many. Now, that isn't to say that when we go out to do like asphalt for our streets or other big projects where it's a competitive market, those absolutely should always be competitive bids. And in fact, any contract that we do, I know oftentimes we've extended them because we've had a contract. I'd rather go out to bid at least on a minimum every 5 years on anything so we can get a good idea of what the marketplace has to offer.
Thank you. And Wayne, you're next on that question.
Yes, that's everything David said. I would probably do 3 years instead of 5 years. But aside from that, there's more to just the bidding than just dollars and cents. Many times we're selecting a bidder because of the services also that they provide and their availability to the village on an emergency basis and a proven track record. There's even times when we'll take a little bit of a higher bid if it's a local business. So I learned that too when I became on the board, that it's not all like something weird going on. What it is it has certain logic where we use the knowledge of our staff to make some good choices. And to David's point too, we do look right down at the bottom and see if this is budgeted for. And that's one of those fixed cost type of things that we have to vote on maybe 80% or 85% of the time. So yeah, no bids. No, I don't believe in that. But once in a while, without the competition and bidding, we got to take it.
Thank you. And then finally, Pete Pellegrino, no bid contract. Wait, Pete, you're muted. I want to unmute and we'll start the timer when you get that figured out.
Sorry about that. I am not a fan of the no bid contracts. I do not allow them at my organization, so I would not allow them in as mayor of Roselle. I think these days with how you have communication and different access to different companies across the country or the world, I think you could find proposals for pretty much anything that's out there. I think it just leads to a level of more trust and transparency if you just do not allow no bid contracts and just get bids for everything. On an organizational level, I pretty much take everything out for bid every other year. It keeps everybody honest, it keeps everybody on the same page, and it makes everybody understand that, you know, this is a competitive world and things change. And they change rather quickly these days. You know, 3 years, 5 years down the road is a long perspective. I think the more competition you bring into any bids that you do, it is better for everybody. I also don't tolerate overbids. When you put out a request for proposals, they need to live by those bids. You can't allow 30, 40, 50% overruns when you've already had a request for proposal, they put their bids in. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, speaking of bids and equipment and things like that, that the village is involved in procuring for its citizens, and Wayne, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts on green energy and the use of community solar for the village?
You know what? I'm all for solar. I was going to put it in my house. That's still yet to be determined. I've got a great southern exposure. The village, I believe the ComEd pretty much provides the village with free electric. But, you know, there's so many flat roofs on factories and different establishments, different commercial sites. I'm surprised that this hasn't moved forward. I think the payback is still a long time once this investment is made. So I think that's what's impeding it. I wish the federal government would back that more as we move forward off of fossil fuels. So I'm all for that. I'm all for wind power and you know, these are the things of the future. They weren't in my life, in my lifetime, but I see the future going that way. Everything's going to be electric one day. So I don't know what the village can do about that. Private industry needs to push that real hard, and so does the federal government, but I'm all for it.
Thank you. And Keith?
Thank you. I think my answer on this question has changed over the last 3 weeks. As far as you know, like electric vehicles, I think we should absolutely. I'm in full support of that. And in theory, I am also in support for some of the green energy. But I think what we need to do is look to what happened in Texas here in the last month. And we need to have safeguards here. We're talking a place like Texas that was, you know, reliant on wind power and some other forms of non-traditional energy. And Texas is one of our leading energy suppliers, and they couldn't provide electrical service for a lot of their residents for up to a week. I am all for that. We need to find alternate forms of energy, green, solar, wind, but we need to roll them out in a fashion that we don't risk public safety and public health, because what happened in Texas is a lesson for all of us as we try to go forward and being more responsible with our energy. But at the end of the day, our role is to protect our citizens. Thank you.
And David?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? Because I think it's referring to a specific program.
Sure. The question is, what are your thoughts on green energy and use of community solar for the village?
Got it. So yeah, community solar is actually an option to diversify what residents have for service providers. So if you think about it today, ComEd delivers your electricity to you, but you can get your power from any number of providers. And so community solar allows a resident the option, kind of like your cable, Comcast, AT&T, et cetera, to choose a different person and make the marketplace more competitive by introducing green energy as a specialty. And I'm absolutely in favor of that. In addition to that, the village has taken steps to revise its code and ordinances to be more solar friendly. So we got a recent recognition from an organization that's nationwide that recognizes that our commitment to allowing residents or businesses to install solar. Now, I think there's steps that we can take. Lake Park's a great example. They bolted on, and I believe it, at least at the time, it was the largest public school solar field ever. And so we have a lot of buildings we could do that on and make it easier, as well as just adopt that, because it's a trend that's not going away. Do we have charging stations in downtown to meet the needs of residents or new businesses? Not yet, but I think that's something we should pursue.
Okay, great. I think this is going to be our last question, and we might go a little over because of having one more, and then we'll do closing statements. The question is, in your past civic involvement, what accomplishments are you most proud of, and how will you transfer this experience to the mayorship? And we're going to start with Pete Pellegrino.
Thank you. My civic involvement at this point is focused on, I have certainly done with things within our Roselle community. I've coached the Roselle Rockers travel softball team. I have been a past president of Hampton Inn Parks Homeowners Association. I work with several charities. I was a big brother. I work with the Ronald McDonald House. So I think those experiences are great, and I will bring that into the role as mayor. One of the ones specifically is, working with the Ronald McDonald House has exposed me to dealing with families who are going through health issues with children, and making sure that those support networks are in place. I think something like that could roll into helping with the post-pandemic and making sure our residents have the support networks in place to go forward from the pandemic. Also making sure that there's support networks for our youth that are in place as they come out of the pandemic, so that some of the negative impacts of the pandemic, we can have those support networks in place for them as well.
Thank you. And David?
And could you repeat that one more time? I apologize.
Oh, no, I'm happy to. The question is, in your past civic involvement, what accomplishments are you most proud of, and how will you transfer this experience to the mayorship?
Okay, perfect. So there's two things. When I look at my time as trustee, and this is the most recent thing I did, but my work on the Envision Roselle 2050 plan, we did one of the most encompassing community engagement processes possible. We did an app survey, we did a huge town hall, we had many focus groups, and it engaged all of our public bodies, the schools, the parks, the libraries, for the first of its kind that we've ever done. Because the thing is, Roselle's carved up. Roselle as a village only controls so much of its destiny, because the schools are going to attract residents and we need to make sure they're tip top. The parks make a quality of life impact, but we're not in charge of them. And I don't know a lot of people understand that. And so that was something that for the first time we all got together, and it took a year to really drive home what are those 5 values and principles that we want to do, looking out 30 years into our future. Granted, COVID really put us behind the 8 ball and getting that implemented. We're starting to get that going. And that's something that as mayor, I really want to pursue, that level of collaboration with our local leaders and making sure that we're able to deliver for Roselle residents for the future.
Thank you. And Wayne?
So go ahead and ask that question again, please.
I'm happy to. In your past civic involvement, what accomplishments are you most proud of, and how will you transfer this experience to the mayorship?
Yeah, thank you. I've been involved in 11 different organizations presently, but in the past, I got to say, the cameras on cops was one of the things that we were able to vote on. I pretty much initiated that idea. And of course, David voted for it too, as the board passed it. The EAB, where we saved 600 trees. I told Hank the other day that was one of the greatest presentations he ever made to the village, changing our minds about saving the trees instead of cutting them down. We as a park board, we made it possible for Roselle to have their downtown development when we made Parkside Park into a water retention area. Fighting ComEd on the 390 was an amazing thing for the village. We rallied with 4 other villages to basically show ComEd that this was not an appropriate place to be doing this. The RSCA, the Roselle Sister Cities, right now we're trying to get a German and an Italian sister city. So those are all things I'm very proud of and excited about, and would like to take my experiences with those to do new things as mayor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to do one more question before we close. I'm assuming you guys have the time. You don't have to rush off anywhere, do you?
Sure, I always sit in my basement in a suit.
We're running a little late.
It's a not hobby, Wayne.
And we're going to start with David. I think David's next to go first on this one. Okay, so the question is, increased crime is in the news along the Lake Street corridor, including carjackings and armed robberies, as well as the recent tragedy at Indian Lakes. These events lower property values and make it harder to market the area to niche retailers and restaurants. How can we be sure that inviting cannabis dispensaries to our community will not also invite people involved in this type of criminal activity?
Well, I think it's a great question and it's a fair question. I think the thing is, the reality is it's happening today. Whether we sell it in our boundary or not, they can go to another municipality and buy it and bring it here and bring the crime with them. More often than not, when our police are engaged in pulling people over, it's not our own residents. It's people who are cutting through Roselle on their way to and from whatever they're doing. And so, we've been appropriately funding our police department. We had a study that was recently conducted, and we've been making steps to continue to empower and enable them with the right technology and the training to, solve this issue. And I think it's something that something we need to continue to work on. Working with the business owners, specifically on Lake Street, I think we have a huge opportunity both to partner with them as well as the county, because a lot of Lake Street is unincorporated DuPage County. And if we can work together, we can put together a plan, identify what's happening, see the trends, and work to solve this in an intergovernmental way instead of just going it alone. Because the problem is, a lot of times, whether it started here or not, if it ends here, we have to clean it up and deal with it. And that's my approach.
Thank you. And Wayne, you're next.
Well, the Lake Street corridor is one thing. The Picton shooting was another thing. But I wanted to say the Black Lives Matter march that we had in June showed a significant partnership between our police and the protesters. In fact, our police protected those protesters from about 3 incidents that might have happened had they not been on duty. The House Bill 3853, which is supposed to limit our police and what they can do and can't do. Thankfully, we've got them trained. And many of these things in that House bill we're already doing, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 new caveats to that. Marijuana, I don't know that that's going to bring more trouble to the area. I will say one thing about the taxes about marijuana. We should never bring in anything on the basis of it's going to provide taxes. We should bring things on in the village on the basis of, is it going to improve the quality of our life? And then the taxes can be the secondary reason.
Thank you. And Pete, same question.
Thank you. Can you repeat the question, please?
I am happy to do that. It's a long question. It has to do with Lake Street corridor, carjackings, armed robberies, recent tragedy at Indian Lakes. The statement is these events lower property values and make it harder to market the area to niche retailers and restaurants. How can we be sure that inviting cannabis dispensaries in our community will not also invite people involved in this type of criminal activity?
Thank you for repeating the question.
Sure.
First, I'm going to start by saying that we have an excellent police department here in Roselle. I recently met with the police chief, and I was glad to hear that we are well down the road of meeting the requirements of the reform bill that was recently passed in Springfield. As far as the specific cannabis issue, recently we asked that question a couple of questions ago, that I personally am not in favor of doing that. I think the first thing you hear when you discuss the topic is that we do it for increased revenue. And that is not why we should do things. We have to keep in mind public safety, and we have to keep in mind other aspects other than just trying to find additional revenue. I don't think the dispensaries are a cure-all for all the funding issues that we have. That said, we need to put in whatever practices we can and work with our police department to make sure that if it does go down as we approve it, that we have the measures in place to make sure that some of the potential negative impacts don't happen.
Thank you. Okay, well, we're at 12:20. There are more questions, but I'm not sure if we should wrap it up yet. I think, I don't know about you guys, but maybe
We should wrap up,
we
Ginger.
should wrap up. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Robert has been texting me, telling me to make sure I ask this question and don't forget that one. And here's a new one. So that's been really fun. And so wrap up is a good time. And we are going to start with Wayne because he went last before, and you have a 1-minute wrap up.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thanks again to the League of Women Voters. Really appreciate this time. Thanks to David and Pete. I've been their teammates with each one of those guys. David on the board and Pete on the basketball court. But anyway, we as a family moved to Roselle for many reasons, which were the library and the best sewer and water system around. Raised a family, we've invested in real estate, we've worshiped at great churches, enjoyed a safe and healthy life here. We've worked with and been motivated by 2 past mayors and have been a unifying voice whenever possible, and have also been successful in dealing with crises on the village board in the past. We will be confronted with onboarding challenges for a new administrator and board members, and in an exit plan coming out of the pandemic. Roselle needs a smooth transition, and having me as mayor will provide that. In addition, I will be your full-time mayor, and you'll be able to call me anytime. Together, we can do the impossible here in Roselle. Vote for me on April 6th. Thank you.
Thank you. And David, you're in the middle. You get to go in the middle again.
Makes it easy. I don't have to worry about where I'm at. Well, thank you again for having this opportunity for us all. Roselle is more than just another place for me. It's the place I grew up. It's where I went to school. It's where I had my first job, actually. It's the place where I met my wife, and now where I'm raising my family. And it's the place where I hope someday my daughter will want to return to start her family. And that's why my number one priority, if elected as mayor, would be to make sure our local businesses survive this pandemic and we start working on building a stronger Roselle for generations to come. Instead of spending time and resources fighting for corporations to relocate to Roselle, I want to invest in our local businesses, help them grow and attract their peers so we have a unique, thriving business culture that radiates beyond just Main Street, reducing our tax burden that we place on residents. We need to have bold ideas and that honor our history while also sowing future seeds of sustained prosperity. We need to invest in our infrastructure responsibly so that way we diffuse this ticking time bomb for the next generation before it's too late. I appreciate everyone listening today. And if you'd like to learn more about me or the campaign or to contact me, you can visit rosellestrong.com. And, everyone, I hope you go out and vote.
Thank you. And finally, last but not least, is Pete Pellegrino. 1 minute closing statement.
Thank you. In closing, I'd like to thank